If you're interested in using an agent and you like me based off of this podcast, you can email me at silasjackson@capitalrealestatend.com. I'm an agent with Capital Real Estate Partners. We have an office in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota.
What's cooler than that?
Silas Jackson, welcome to Behind the Glass. How many times have you been on this show?
This has got to be at least the third time, right?
Probably, yeah.
Probably number 3, yeah.
If you guys have not watched the other episodes we did with Silas, I guess I'll make sure to link them in the description of this video.
Yeah.
That way you can just go back and watch those. I want to talk a little bit about your childhood, and I wrote down some questions that we're going to ask about it. Firstly being, where were you born?
So this is actually a fun one for me because people ask me where I'm from often. And I'll tell them I was born in Hawkins, Wisconsin, but I'm from North Dakota and I've been here, for about 20 years is what I say.
Hey, congratulations.
And people are, it's funny because people who know me and know like that I was only there for a few months as a baby are like, why do you even bring that up? Right. But I like to make myself seem more traveled than I am.
So you throw that in
so
there.
I throw that in there and say, I'm here. So I was born Hawkins, Wisconsin, same place you were born, actually.
Yeah, man, we're the only two in the family.
We're the only two. It's just us.
It's interesting how we both turned out very similar. Too.
Yeah, it is. It is. It must be something to do with Wisconsin.
Must be a Wisconsin thing.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know actually that you just brought that up. I've never known how long. And I'm your older brother. Let's all keep this in mind as we're going through this video. I never knew how long you lived in Wisconsin. You said a few months?
I don't think I was even a year old. I mean, I think I was maybe 10 months old from what I've heard from mom and dad. Yeah.
So you don't really remember?
I remember nothing.
Wow.
I remember nothing.
Yet you're traveled.
I'm traveled. I've been to
throw that out there. You've been to 2 states.
I've been to 2. Okay. Yeah.
You've been to Minnesota.
I've been to Minnesota. I haven't lived in those places, but I've. Okay. I mean, Wisconsin is famous for cheese, right?
Yeah.
I usually try and throw in some trivia about Wisconsin dairy. To imply that I know more about it than I do.
Right.
Funnily, yeah.
The Packers, you can always throw that
the Packers, yeah.
Even though our family never grew up caring really about football. Football was not a thing.
It's actually funny you mentioned football because, so what was it? I think it was just this Thursday. I woke up and I was going about my day, and I just had this thought in my head that like, and no offense to anyone, but I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, I really don't care about football. I don't know why that was on my mind, but I was like, I don't care about it. And then I was leaving an appointment, and mom texted me and asked me if I would go to a football game with my sister to watch. What? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like a local game?
Yeah, it was a local game. I forget the teams. I think it was U Mary versus a team from Jamestown.
Really?
Yeah.
We probably crushed them.
U Mary crushed them.
Of course because we're number 1.
Because we're number 1, obviously. Yeah.
We do have, what is it, the Bison? Isn't the Bison like one of the greatest college football teams? I think so.
I will defer to you on that. I have no understanding of that at all.
Don't quote me and don't defer to me. I'm the least versed individual in this subject. Don't know what I'm talking about. I just know people seem to love the Bison.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you haven't guessed, we're in North Dakota. So the question was born and raised.
Born, yes.
So born in Wisconsin, raised in North Dakota,
Raised in North Dakota. Yep, completely. Yeah.
You remember nothing about Wisconsin.
Remember nothing.
What would you say is your earliest memory of North Dakota? Or earliest memory, period.
Earliest memory, period, I think of 2 memories. One memory is something that mom also remembers me doing as a baby, is at our house where mom and dad live, there's a table, and I was crawling around, and I crawled underneath the table, and I sat down, and I looked back at mom, and I smiled, and I remember doing that. And mom tells the story back to me, and she remembers me doing that, and she remembers watching me do it. That's probably the earliest memory that I can recall. Other than that, the second earliest memory is involves Jacelyn. And I remember we were going to get some photos taken at Walmart. I think you've heard this story before.
Maybe.
Me, Mom, and Jacelyn were going to get photos taken. It's if you've seen me in the baby suit.
Yep.
That one. When we went and took those photos, I was walking into Walmart with Mom and Jacelyn, and I was trying to talk to Jacelyn. And Jacelyn was being mean to me.
Sounds about right.
Yep. She was in a mood, and so we went into Walmart and we took these photos, and I think that's about as early as it gets from my memory.
Isn't that strange, too, that people used to go to stores and take family photos? You'd get on like a blanket.
Yeah.
And they'd snap a picture of it. Then you got to get the footage developed. Mm-hmm. I remember doing stuff like that. And I mean, now, obviously, the world's changed completely.
Oh, yeah.
Digital everything. Your photos are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
I don't even know if anybody uses those film cameras. They might.
Some
maybe
people
like traveling
might,
people.
as like a retro, like people that are really into photography, but I don't, it's a very different thing because it used to be that it was like a planned, like scheduled, like this was a big deal thing.
Right.
And now it's like, dude, I have so many photos and I don't care about them.
I hate photos. I can only go through about the last 20 that I've taken, and then after that, on my phone, if I start scrolling, I'm like, oh, this is too much. Why are these all here?
Yeah.
But if you take the time one day to go back and look through all the photos on your phone, it can bring up some, especially as you get older. Oh, man, it's going to bring up some crazy memories and thoughts.
Yeah.
And you might cry. Going to bring up some regrets.
I was actually just thinking I need to go through and delete some stuff that annoys me when it pops up in like my phone.
Memory stuff. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Why do they do that? What if you had a horrible breakup and like, it's like next year they're like, hey, remember this girl?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. Yeah, that's exactly what they do.
It just pops up.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty crazy though that you remembered smiling and being that young.
Mm-hmm.
Did Mom tell you how old you were at that time? When she was retelling that story, do you remember?
No, but I had to be less than 5 years old. Probably, I'm guessing about 3, based off of the time period.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Boy, that's a great thing to remember when you're talking about if you ever end up raising children. You got to be real careful. You're like, they're 3, they're 4. They're never going to remember this. I'm going to beat their mother.
Right. Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic, and I'll fix my problem maybe when they're 10 or whatever. They're not going to remember any of this, right? Children remember. Their memories can go back very, very long.
And it's one thing, too. It's not even, there's a saying that I like, and I think this applies broadly to parents and children's, but the specific saying is about fathers and sons. And it goes, every son will follow his father's example, not his advice.
Wow.
And that really resonated with me because a lot of times, like, Dad is a good talker, but I think I learned the most from Dad just by watching him.
Really? Yeah. That makes sense. I would agree with that. You kind of want to be like, because that's almost all you have is watching people because you don't really have the mental capacity to comprehend what's actually going on. So you fill in all those blanks in your head when you're really young and you make people up to be whatever you kind of, you're the superhero.
Right.
I'm watching you, and if I think you look strong or I admire you or whatever, it's a pretty solid deal. I'm just going to pattern my behavior after that because that's what I want. I want to be I want to be the hero too when I'm little.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with children. I don't have any, you don't have any, but in the future, that's a great question to ask you. Maybe not right now. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
What do you think? You think you want children ever?
I think absolutely I would want children. I would think I would like to have a lot of children, if I'm being honest. As far as the timeline for that, I'm not particularly rushed, but I do think it's something that I want to experience at some point. I've always liked the idea of having, my own family, wife and children. I think it's necessary too. I think it's necessary. But I also think it would be a great experience for me because one thing I've learned is that whenever I have to teach something, I learn more about it than before I had to teach it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think you learn more about being an adult, and especially in my case, like being a man, if you have to teach it eventually. And you learn how to communicate it, because being able to transfer that is a different level of skill.
Yeah. I've noticed a lot, because I do watch Joe Rogan. I've noticed a lot when he's talking to fighters, because he does a lot with the fighting world and UFC, and a lot of these guys who end up going and teaching after they've fought, they'll reiterate how incredible it is how much they learn when they start to teach fighting moves, and they observe other people doing it, and they're explaining it to people, and everything's kind of slowed down, and from that third person view, they're able to watch, and it's incredible the amount that you can learn yourself. You go back, even if you think you're a master of your craft at a certain thing.
Right.
You know, even with me, for instance, with the jobs that I've had in my life, I've had to teach certain people my jobs. And as I'm teaching them, I'm realizing certain things, and I'm relearning, and I'm like, oh, yeah. It just clears, it fills in all the little gaps that you might have, you know? It's really interesting to watch, but it's true. And I wonder, maybe if, I don't know how this would really work, but if you're trying to learn something, right, during the process of you learning it, is there a way for you to try to teach someone else that would also benefit you in learning as you're learning? Or should you just wait, learn it, maybe one day pass that on and fill it in?
I think you're onto something with that, because one thing I've noticed is, so a lot of times, and maybe this is just me, but I'm a lot better at giving other people advice than I am taking my own advice or giving myself the kind of counsel that I can offer to other people.
Right.
And so if you can kind of separate yourself from the circumstances that you were involved in and speak to yourself as if you were teaching or helping another person, and so you can kind of replicate that instance of additional learning through teaching, but within yourself all at once.
Right.
I try to do that a little bit more, because you can step outside of yourself. I feel like you make better decisions. You make more rational decisions. So I like to do that as much as I can with things.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say a great way to put that is, if you just think about it objectively, as soon as you try to teach something to someone else, you're going to find out what you do or don't truly know about that subject.
Right. No.
Right? You're going to find out real quick and right away that, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about in this area. Or here, I'm very well versed. I can show them and explain it. Right. You're going to find out real quick as soon as you try to teach someone else.
Right. No, it's one thing about, like, when you have to speak or teach something to a group of children or a group of adults, it's actually easier to, it's less intimidating to do it with adults at a certain level. And the reason why is because the children will ask all of the questions that the adult won't answer. Or the adults won't ask themselves. And to me, it's like, you should be able to answer the children's questions, but they don't know better than to not ask.
Right.
And the adults do sometimes.
Right.
But if you can't explain it to a child, then it shows something.
That's true.
So, yeah, it's very interesting.
You'll learn in those teachable moments.
Yeah.
It's 100% a teachable moment, isn't it? That's pretty interesting. See, I just learned something. All right, here's another question. I want to keep going with your childhood a little bit. So, I don't know if we've already kind of talked about this or not, but how did you view your parents and siblings? Now, let's say we get to the point in your life when you do have memory, you're recalling things, right? Go back to those years.
Yeah.
How would you say you viewed your parents and your siblings around you?
With admiration, I would say. I had a lot of admiration for my parents and my siblings, and because I'm on the younger distribution of the siblings, it was easy for me to be able to look up and admire.
Right.
I would say that was the key thing. Admiration and wanting to emulate, which has grown and adapted to a different type of emulation. But I still do think I carry that. But that's probably the greatest thing that I had growing up, was being able to look up to so many people. Was of great benefit to me.
I would say that's probably one of the most important things for a child, if they're growing up, to be able to have the ability to look around and say, oh yeah, I would like to be like that, as opposed to, you know, we know some children grow up in households where they're constantly terrified of the parents, terrified of their brothers and sisters, because the uncle is molesting the child, the grandparents beat you, your mother is never there, right? So you don't have anything to look up to and emulate. It's just a disaster of a household. And adults, you know, in a lot of situations, don't take responsibility for the way that the children are raised. And you think you are training this young mind, and you have a massive responsibility to give them something to look up to, right? So it's a testament probably to mom and dad, you know, more than us. We were probably idiots when you were looking up to us.
I mean, you were smarter than me.
You know, but it's probably more or less a testament to mom and dad and their parenting skills, that they were able to provide for you an environment, and me, an environment to look up to, you know, rather than this terrorizing household where it was just chaos. And I would agree with you. Yeah, they did a phenomenal job. Caring for us, and 6 children they had. I don't know if anybody knows that or not, but yeah, 6 children. Not rich by any means.
Nope.
But very well taken care of. And it's more than can be said for a lot of the adults raising children nowadays.
100%. Yeah.
Do you remember any specific things about your childhood that grabbed your attention? Whether it was behaviors of people around you, a movie you watched, the specific place we lived in, anything that grabbed your attention you think that maybe shaped kind of the mindset of the individual that you are now. We weren't really around, because you're a very professional individual now, I would say. You know, at least you're spawning into that, or you're creating that person. You're in the cocoon right now.
Yeah.
You know? But we weren't really around business people, you know? So that's one of the reasons why you're such a unique individual, because that's something we're going to talk about later in this episode. But you're a very intelligent individual. Did anything in specific grab your attention? Were you I remember that photo, remember those photos I took of you when you were young? When you had the bandana on,
yeah, the Rambo style stuff.
You were pretty interested in like fighting and like. I thought maybe Silas was going to go in the military when he was young. Like,
I thought about that very seriously, more seriously than Mom was ever comfortable with. Considering doing something like that, being a Navy SEAL.
Yeah,
that was the stuff that I thought I wanted to do, and I still definitely respect that profession, and have a great deal of admiration for the people that do undertake that nobly, because it's a great sacrifice. But as I grew, I thought it was wise to make a long-term strategy more important than other things, and I didn't see as much long-term benefit to that, as well as the fact that it wasn't what I thought it was. I had a warped perception of what it meant to be a professional soldier, and the idea that you are an instrument of war, but you don't necessarily know how you'll be wielded. And I think that was the thing that frightened me the most, which is being told to do things that were not right and being required to comply with instructions. And I wasn't willing to make that commitment.
Some people who go into the military and do very well at it and love it, they'll come out and tell you, from the time I was very small, it was all I wanted to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking about something like that, it almost has to be that level of passion for you, especially if you're going to go and be the best you can be and tip of the spear type of stuff.
Yep.
You need to have nothing else in your mind.
Right.
That's got to be your sole focus.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we weren't surrounded by military anything growing up. I remember 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were living in South Carolina and I remember, I think they played it for us. We were in school and they played it for us on a TV. And I remember the adults whispering and talking weird and for like a day. And then it all just kind of went away, you know? A lot of kids in public school and stuff like that, they would have, the military would come and visit those schools, you know, for recruiting purposes.
Yeah.
You know, during the time you're in school and growing up and stuff. We were never exposed to any of that. I think had we been, especially the way we are as men, I think there's a massive possibility we'd be all in the military.
Especially us boys. I think they would have at least got half of us.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Corey would have gone.
Because Corey would have definitely gone.
I 100% would have followed
him. And then you
him.
would have followed him.
It would have been one. And if either of us had died or gotten our legs blown off or something, would have probably determined if you or Seth would have followed. You know?
Exactly.
It's like, hold on, wait a minute. Maybe I don't want to do this. I don't know. So, yeah, we were kind of isolated. Yeah. Growing up, you know, it was more or less farming, I guess, than anything. Farming / ranching is what it was for me. You know, so and that's kind of an isolated life, you know, in itself. You know, being a farmer or a rancher or whatever it may be, it's you don't get a whole lot of those outside influence. It's all about this life, right?
This family,
Crops,
these same people every day,
animals. So. Yeah, not a lot. There wasn't a whole lot to grab our attention, you know? We were raised very Christian. Our parents didn't let us really watch TV. We weren't raised watching television, you know? I remember starting to watch movies, you know, pretty late in life. Not like, I don't think teens, but I don't know. I don't even know.
You might have been.
Could have been.
Yeah, I think you were.
I don't know. It was later in life, you know, they allowed us to start watching movies, right? So our family was strict and so yeah, that's a tough question to answer because we didn't have a whole lot of extra coming in, you know?
You know, in terms of things that grabbed my attention, I guess I could rephrase that like something that kind of shaped the mentality that I carry with me still today. I got it through, and I'll give you an example with a story, but I got it through, again, watching my older siblings and my parents and how they carried themselves with the work that they did and the excellence that they brought to each endeavor that they undertook. And so I remember one night, because we were homeschooled, I was studying for a test, and it was either a biology test or some geometry test. And I was not feeling like I was comprehending the material. And I was getting tired. And I was like, I think I'm going to go to bed and I'll do better if I get a full night's sleep. And then I stopped. And I said, no. If I fail this test, it will be because I am stupid and not because I am lazy. And that has been powerful for me because I didn't know, and again, this is because of a lack of a frame of reference outside my own family. I didn't know if I was actually smart. So I was like, the only thing I can control is how hard I work. And so that's why I dedicated so much to increasing my ability to do work.
Right.
And that has been critical for me.
I can say hard work, or maybe I should ask this question. Would you say with enough hard work, eventually it begins to translate into intelligence through experience?
I think at a certain level, I would say yes, because you could learn enough through hard work to be really good at a specific niche skill set, I think.
Right. It's like repetition.
Exactly. If you talk about intelligence in a different way, like your ability to learn other things quickly,
Right.
that might be different. But I do think that an average person or a normal person is capable of a lot more than they think, but they underestimate the volume of work that is required to achieve those things.
You kind of have to hammer. If you don't have that natural gift of intelligence like some people have, where they read a book and they retain all the information, I was never that person. I could read a book 20 times and I'll still ask you what the title of the book was at the end of it. That's where I'm at. You know? So it's like I do gain the knowledge over reading the book 20 times. I'll get some knowledge out of it, but I'm definitely not one of the people that learns quickly. I've never been that. And I need to learn by hands-on.
Well, that's another thing is a lot of people, it's not that they don't learn quickly, it's that they don't learn that the way they're being taught as well as another method.
Right.
So a lot of hands-on works much better for me. I need to do stuff in order to learn it. They say that learning and memory basically work like this. You don't remember something or learn something through being exposed to it several times necessarily. You remember things or you learn things through constantly having to recall them.
Right.
So if I tell you 20 times you need to do this, you may not remember it. But if you have to do it 20 times a day, you'll remember it when you have to recall it yourself.
That sounds like me and how I learn things.
Yeah.
I have to do them 20 times. Then I'll remember.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I've always hated that about myself, too. Because you feel like you're working harder than everybody else to do some of the simplest things or something that everybody else seems to naturally be able to do, right? It's like I feel like I have to work so much harder. But it's okay because in doing that, I feel like I have a leg up because I have to force myself to work harder, which means you have to have a certain level of discipline.
Right.
Right? And discipline is never a bad thing, in my opinion.
Yes, completely.
So it ends up being a positive thing because you have to have the discipline to teach yourself or have someone else teach you 20 times to learn that one thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And it's not easy to sit there 20 times in front of a book and read it or sit in front of a do-it-yourself video and watch it 20 times before you get it.
Yep.
You know, or do a task at work 20 times before you're decent at it. It sucks doing that, but that also requires discipline. And I feel like I have good discipline.
Right.
I'm not where I want to be, but I've got good discipline. Maybe 20 times, maybe 20 times more through life. I'll have 20 more years, maybe. I'll have the discipline I want. But discipline is just that, though, right? You can have discipline through discipline.
Yeah.
Discipline yourself to have discipline. It's as simple as it can possibly be, but it's also difficult.
It's simple, but not easy. Yeah, it's one of those things. Easier said than done.
Yeah, it's funny, too, when you were mentioning how different people learn. It's just a straight-up segue away from what we're talking about, but I always think about, we're black.
Yeah.
We are.
We
right?
are. We are. That we are.
You're a little lighter, but whatever.
Yeah.
But I always think about, it's super depressing when I read news stories and they're talking about how African American children are just the worst at school, right? And I wonder, why we don't try teaching them in a different way, if that would help. Obviously, where you grow up, what your parents are like, what your environment's like plays a massive part in it. But in school in specific, they just seem to struggle a lot in America. And I wonder if we're not trying any different methods or if anyone even cares enough to try to teach them in a different way.
I think for sure it's obvious that there's flaws in the educational system and it has disparately negative effects on certain demographics. When it comes to those things, like for example, something that's tangential is like the performance of boys as compared to girls in the education system. Boys are tending to fall behind to put it lightly. And there's a few variables behind that, because when you look at gender, you can see that there's a biological difference to that, maybe. When the variable is race, it's a little bit harder to see what the biological factor might be that's impacting that. For me, it seems to be, because obviously if you have a tumultuous home life, that will absolutely impact your ability to perform in school. And so then the question would be, are black children disproportionately disaffected in their home life? And I think that's clear when you look at the rates, and we could pull this up, but I feel like it's common knowledge that there's a lot going on there that's not productive for children.
Right, from those households.
Yeah. So with that seems to be the root of that, which is something that is a societal issue, but has to be addressed individually. So it's tricky.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It has to start at home.
Exactly.
I know it's a hard thing people don't want to talk about, but the parents who are not growing up and then they're having children themselves,
mm-hmm.
not providing those children with a reasonable atmosphere of living, any kind of guidance. I think music plays a strong part in
subliminal
behavior.
Messaging. Definitely impacts. Yeah.
I think certain music, you grow up listening to certain music. We know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Kill a blank, rob, kill,
mm-hmm.
steal. It's like, how much of that is affecting that person's
mentality? Even?
Yeah. What do you think if dad would have played that for you growing up in the house, and dad would have been wearing a wife beater and smoking weed? And,
mm-hmm.
you know, it's
mm-hmm.
like, think about it. It's
mm-hmm.
I say maybe these children need to be taught differently. But also sometimes the answer to a problem is the simplest thing that's right in front of your face, right? And we just look around it. We look over it.
Start
with
just
the so
simplest
happens to be the parents in a lot of these situations that are not performing adequately for these children, and they're not offering them any kind of foundation for them to grow, right? Not giving them any kind of chance to start out well in life. And behavior, the way you behave around other people, can grossly affect the way other people want to interact with you, right? Meaning your teachers, other students, right? If you have a horrible attitude, a horrible mentality, a horrible vocabulary, nobody's going to want to teach you or be around you or deal with you. So then we can see how that kind of snowballs, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a domino effect.
100%. It's incontrovertible, though. We can say this for sure. Parents play a key role in a child's life. And
100%.
Parents in a lot of black families are absent, unfortunately. Fathers, I'll say fathers, too.
Fathers.
They're being raised by their mothers, right? I can't remember why I got off on that, but it made me, whatever we were talking about made me think about that. It hurts. It sucks. It's one of those sore spots for me in life when I hear it on the news.
Yeah.
African-American children are this and that and just horrible in math and science and this. And it's like, Jesus Christ, where are the parents? Right? We cannot blame. I almost tried to blame the system too at the beginning. Like, why aren't we teaching them differently? You know, it's discipline. They need discipline. They need to be, I won't say beat, but there are stubborn children in the world. You're going to have different temperaments, you know, and you're going to have to know how to deal with those. Some children are very soft and gentle spoken, and they're easy to get along with and easy to teach. And other children, they need to be punished, you know, not physically beat up or anything like that, but somehow you can't be a pushover. Fear.
You have to set boundaries, clear expectations and standards, and make sure that you don't allow those to be infringed upon.
Your child cannot be the ruler of the house, and they have to be well aware of that. And I think that's what ends up happening. All right, let's keep going. Yeah, on your childhood. We're still in your childhood.
Let's go.
How does that make you feel?
It feels like a long childhood.
All right, so here's this next question going into kind of what we were already kind of talking about. What was it like growing up on a farm? And if you could choose an upbringing where you grew up in the city, would you have done that knowing what you know now? Would you rather have gone to public school and grown up in a normal neighborhood and had friends? And obviously you don't know how that would have turned out, but it's just a theoretical question. As opposed to growing up on the farm and having your siblings as your schoolmates and your mom teaching you and your dad teaching you. You had no teachers.
You know, I like that I have a different origin story than other people. I like that it's unique. Not that it's anything crazy, but I do like that it stands out. I don't think I would change it. As far as the social aspect of my young life, to me, I actually didn't notice much of a deficit in my social skills. I think I was slightly less socially developed early, but I caught up pretty quickly. And I also think I got something from not having been around as many youths that allowed me to not care too much what other people thought, to not be as easily influenced by peer pressure. And that has been extraordinarily advantageous for me. So I have no regret about that.
Yeah, we never had the cliques to worry about. You never had to try to be a part of the cool kids, or you never got picked on because you were a goth or whatever, right? We never had to deal with that.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how stuff like that, well, we can look at schools now and just see how it affects children. You know, it's magnified by the internet and by social media. And I don't think it's a positive thing at all. I think we had enough flavoring mixed in of a little bit of outside world with a little bit of the farm life type of thing to keep us grounded. You always hear people say, oh, homeschooled kids are so weird and they're strange and awkward, and farm kids can be weird too. And it's like,
when you define weird, it's like, maybe it's weird to a city kid, but I think the city kid's weird to the farm kid.
100%. You guys are weird to us.
It's like maybe they mean different. Really, you know, and it just doesn't bother me, like, because I just don't care I just don't care. That's my favorite thing to do, is to not care about things that don't matter. That's my number one favorite thing to do. It's like, does this matter? No, I don't care.
I am starting to live in that world too. It's better that way. It's better for my mental.
So much more efficient.
Health. It's even more efficient.
Yeah.
I get more done when I do not care. And I don't have to have a bunch of silly hobbies. And so it's funny. I think I've told this before on a recent podcast. Maybe not, but somebody was asking me. I had just met him recently, and they're, what are your hobbies? You know, what do you do? Because everybody's got boats. Everybody's got ATVs and campers. And they do all these things. And I literally sat there and thought for like a minute, like, what are my hobbies? Oh, that's right. I don't have any. You know why? Because I work and I'm focused on other things, right? And this podcast being one of them takes up a whole lot of my time. And I'm fine with that. I don't care that I don't have a boat. I don't care that I don't have a camper. I don't care about going to concerts. And I love that I don't care. And I'm now happy to tell people, no, I'm not going.
I feel so understood right now. I feel so understood. No, I completely love everything you just said. Because to me, what hobbies are things that are not purposeful. Like when you talk about someone who like collects boats and bottles or something, and this is not to disparage anyone's hobbies, but this is just from my perspective. I need the things that I spend my time on to serve a purpose. And I get excited and enthusiastic about things that are useful and meaningful in my life. And so the more of that I have, the better I feel. And it just doesn't engage me at all, because ultimately I'll look at that boat in the bottle and be like, why? And when I don't have a good answer, but I do have 3 hours that I lost, I don't feel good afterwards. Right. I feel disappointed in myself, and I feel like I've wasted things. This is something I like to say to people, because people will look at my life sometimes and they'll be like, you know, why, it's like, why are you doing this? Like, you're young, like you don't need to be in a rush. And I'm like, I'm not in a rush. I just don't have any time to waste. And that's a different thing. None of my time needs to be wasted.
No. And it's important to learn that lesson early.
Mm-hmm.
The earlier you can learn that lesson, the better off you'll be, because the more time you'll be able to take advantage of throughout your life. And time is short.
Yeah. It's short, and you don't know how much of that short supply you have.
Yeah, learn lessons from older people. I was talking to a guy the other day at work, and he said, you start making all this money at your job, right? And you go and you buy all these fancy things to the point where the financial security that you had from having all the money without all the extracurricular nonsense, gone. He's like, all of a sudden one day you wake up and you realize, I have all these beautiful, wonderful things, but I can't stop working because I have to pay for all of this.
Yes.
So you have to learn moderation in your life. You have to learn discipline. Cut out the fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're working out, you're trying to diet, you want to get in shape, you want a body that looks good, you're going to have to cut out the fat, the carbs, the sugar, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to fix your life in general, you're going to have to cut out the excess nonsense. You just cannot fill up your day with all that.
Yeah.
Time is short, and people waste too much of it, but it's a valuable lesson for the rest of us that can sit there and watch them and learn from that.
Yeah.
Teachable moments. It just happens everywhere, and I love it. I'll take those teachable moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep going on with your childhood. So we kind of already covered this. Would you say that homeschool for children is a good or bad choice for parents from a parent's perspective? Maybe especially nowadays. Would you recommend homeschooling to parents?
If you have the time, I think that there are a lot of benefits to homeschooling. Now, obviously, I'm biased. But I definitely think one thing that helped me, and this is just an idea, it would be different from family to family, but the fact that I had a relationship with my teacher that was one that was loving, it made it easier for me to learn from that person because I knew they had my best interest in mind. So there's something that Dad often says, because he teaches where he works. He instructs people often. And he says, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is something that becomes difficult when you have a teacher that is asking you to do things you don't want to do, that you don't enjoy. You can't see the purpose of it, and you don't believe that they have your long-term interest at heart. And you need to understand that at a very basic level, even a level that you can't articulate, because when you're a child, you don't know how to say, I don't know that you have my best interest at heart.
Right.
But when I see my mom come into the library and correct my math homework, I understand that there must be a purpose for what she's doing. And so caring for your children in that way offers something that it is much more difficult to find in a public setting. So that's one aspect.
I think it's a great one, too. The family dynamic that we have now, especially that we're adults and we go back home and we see our family and the amount of love that I have for my parents and my siblings. And I guess we could attribute it to all that time that we spent together. Quality time, whether forced or unforced quality time. You know, I can say that has definitely had an impact on my life and the way that I view my family and how much I care for them and love them. So, yeah, if someone was to ask me that question, I would say yes. Especially nowadays, 100% I would recommend you homeschool your children. If you don't have time, you better find time. That would be my argument. Because the opposite of that is your children getting thrown into a government program, essentially.
Yeah.
That's going to train their minds how they want them to be trained, and teachers who are going to train your children how they want to be trained and throw these agendas at them. And although I won't get off into all that right now, we need children that are trained up with good values and traditional morals, right? I think America was founded on good principles and good values at its core. And I think we're straying away from that. We're taking a hard left right now. I mean that in every sense of the word. We're taking a hard left. And it's terrifying. And I think protecting your children's innocence, protecting their minds, their malleable brains should be, if you are a parent, one of the most important things
Paramount.
in your life.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I do. I think it's right because it's the impact of that is often underestimated. It's something you just get out of the way. It's something you just like, we got to do this and we just need to get it done. You got to pass these things where there's not much care taken for whether or not the ideas that are being presented to the children are going to shape them in a way that will allow them to have the most productive outcomes in their own life so that they can contribute to society in a positive way.
Right.
And that should be the top consideration. I don't know how it's not, but when you come to looking at a government operation and a government program, we all know that those things are wildly inefficient.
And that's what schools have become. It's a government operation. It's a training phase, to teach young adults basically how to be mindless money-making machines for corporations. It's almost literally how it started out. I believe it was Rockefeller that started the schooling system, and their main goal was to train up more factory workers, essentially, right? Don't quote me on that.
I've heard quite a bit of
generally
people
right.
say things along those lines, and it does make sense because the way the education system is kind of set up, and you have to forgive me speaking on it, having not been through it myself, but
right.
It's set up so that there are clear expectations, so that you can get a clear outcome that is predictable. And you teach people lessons like that, and they go out into the world, and the world is so not like that in real life.
Right.
It's much more like there's a bunch of right answers, and the only wrong answer is to do nothing.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
But in school, it's very different. There's one right answer, and we tell it to you, and we drill it into you, and if you don't give us that answer, then you fail the test.
You get punished for that.
You get punished. In life, though, there's twice as much learning opportunity in failure. I've always liked to think of it like that.
Yeah.
Because when you win, when you get it right, you learn that that's right.
Right.
If I fail, I also get to figure out what's right. But then I also get to figure out how to fix something when it breaks.
Right.
So you have twice as much learning opportunity. And that's why failure is actually so critical. Because you don't find out anything when you're right.
No. You get confirmation, you get the pat on the back by other people, and you learn that I can only ever give people the right answer, right? So even if you find yourself in situations where you don't know the answer, you'll try to lie your way out of it or make up something that you think is what these people want to hear, right? Because you don't want to get that big red X in your life. No, you don't want these people judging you because you got it wrong, because you're terrified of failing this test.
Right.
Right?
Well, then you get terrified of failure. And the thing about that is, I think I read a book a while ago, long time ago, that Dad gave me. And in the book, he says, and he's critiquing the quote, he says, failure is not an option. And he follows it up and he says, well, it had better be an option, because whether or not you like it, it's going to happen.
100%.
So quitting is not an option. That's what you should say.
I like that.
Because that's resilience.
Right.
When you don't quit. Failure happens by virtue of trying. And trying is the only way you get anywhere.
Yeah, failure is a normal part of life.
It's quite normal.
Shouldn't be frowned upon. Like you're saying, it's one of the best teaching tools for any individual is when you fail. Now we know what doesn't work.
Right.
And we can improve on it because we went through it. So back to training up your children in a specific way, it's important to me, in every sense of the word, the most amount of time you can spend with your children. The most amount that you can teach them, I think, should be, if you become a parent and you still have these aspirations of, I want to become the greatest actor in the world, or I want to do this and do that, you're going to have to put it all on the back burner, because what we're talking about here is the future of this country. Literally. Children you are raising are America in the future. And what you pump in or do not put into these children's minds at an early age, adolescent, teen, all these, it matters greatly. And we're seeing the effects of it right now, of the lack of teaching that we've been given to our children. We're seeing it. And it's everybody says, oh, every generation hates the next generation or the generation under them, right? They all think, like, your parents.
What a disappointment.
Right.
Yeah.
Your parents were a disappointment to their parents. And their parents were telling them, you guys are going to destroy this country. And now they're telling their children, you guys are.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's only going to go so far, and eventually one of those generations is going to destroy this country, and that's going to be because you can't sit there and tell children, you guys are all going to destroy this country without also looking in the mirror and saying, we raised them. Okay? And it's important that you put a lot of attention and you put a lot of value on how the children are raised. And I think homeschool, if you have it in you and it's an option, I think it's a great tool. Also integrate them with other children. Don't isolate them, That's important, and there's ways to do that. There's community events. There's all kinds of things that you can put your children in where they're not just growing up with themselves, okay? But you also need to have them just to yourself so you can train them. And you have to have good morals and good values and a good foundation to start with. If you're a terrible person, don't homeschool your children. maybe leave that to someone else till you fix your own life, right? We haven't even gotten out of childhood. I don't know how long we can do this.
We got time.
All right. Oh, man, we have another question here. This is I might have asked this earlier already, but in a different way. What influences, like people, books, movies, had the greatest effect on you in your younger years? Was there a specific movie you really liked? Was there a
Gladiator?
Really? That makes sense,
doesn't it?
When I look at you and I think about who you are.
Yeah.
I think Gladiator, 300, those kind of movies. Why in specific? Do you have a reason? The music was very inspirational.
The music was great.
It was on point. I love cinematic music. Makes you cry.
Yeah, that movie was something that really captivated me. I think it was probably one of the most. I can't think of a movie that captivated me more in terms of the storyline. There was something about a man who was a decent man among men who were not very decent.
Wow.
And lost his family, but in the end made sure that he was able to serve justice himself, and then he was at peace to die. It's just been so captivating to me, that storyline. I don't know if it's the fact that it's action and there's sword fighting that it makes it more captivating to me, but that has always been with me. And I think I probably watched that movie. That's probably the most watched movie of mine.
Really? Yeah, that movie really did embody a man handling his business, taking care of everything he needed to take care of, whether violently or through his words when he needed to. And then, then he did what he did. He lived his life, and then he died. Right? There's something powerful to that.
Yeah, I think it was in the acceptance of it. I think acceptance is empowering to me.
Acceptance of his responsibility.
Right. Because when you accept the term, this is a thing I love to think about, is accepting the terms of life and how powerful that makes you, because now you know the rules.
Right.
Yeah. And then you don't have to be afraid.
That is true. And I've heard that told by other people before, especially guys in war. Right? It's one of the greatest examples to use in this scenario. They do say, as soon as you realize and you accept the fact that today you're going to die, and that's okay, you can go out there and focus clearly on what you need to do and do your job to the best of your ability, because you understand all the risk. You understand the rules of this game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to die. They're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
None of that matters anymore. I accept it. I accept death.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can go. That's out of my head. You put that fear out,
Yep.
right? Because when you don't accept,
you're still trying to change it.
right,
Mm-hmm.
right. When you don't accept something that could be an inevitable action in your life or an inevitable scenario, when you won't accept that, right? It's like if you're in debt and your credit card bill is piling up, but you don't want to accept that. You just keep spending money on it, right? Instead of look at the bill and say, I got to pay this down.
Right.
Right. That fear of you not wanting to look at it. No, I don't want to see the bill. I don't want to know. Just, I'll deal with it tomorrow.
Right. Well, it's like the truth shall make you free. Like the
That's
truth
it.
sets you free.
That's it.
And it's the idea is it sets you free from ignorance and fear, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, because people think of the truth often as something that constrains you, like it's a cage or like it's chains that are weighing you down, fetters. I think of truth more as something that is solid, but it's more like the ground than it is a cage. It's the ground beneath your feet.
Right.
And it has to be something that resists you, but it still allows you to stand. And if there's nothing that is outside of you that will resist you, then you can't stand on anything.
Could not have said that any better. That's beautiful. We're going to clip that, I think. There's so many clippable moments in this podcast. I'm going to be a busy man.
Yeah.
But yes, you are absolutely right. And I wish more people would accept that and kind of live their life. See, we talked about this the other day. My truth. There's that now, right?
Yeah.
There's the truth, and now we have a world full of people who are living their truth.
Well, they're just relativists, and they're so like unsophisticated that they wouldn't even know what that term meant. Like that's what's annoying to me.
That's true, yeah. It's your truth. The truth is objective, right? Right? This table, I cannot move. I can't push my hand through this table and just. I can't walk through the table. I can only stand on it, sit on it, put things on it, put my hand on it. Right? The table exists here. Okay, that's an objective truth. If you're living by your truth, you get to make up the rules and the definitions of your truth. At that point, everything just becomes kind of gray, wishy-washy, subjective. You're making things up as you go. That's not a truth anymore. That's something you choose to believe.
Well, it's just like we're just using the word truth to describe an opinion, but we now elevate the opinion to the same credibility as the truth.
Right, which is dangerous.
And that is part of my issue. And the thing is, too, it's not an issue because it doesn't change the truth. What you believe doesn't change reality. What it does do is it makes you a fool because you walk through life expecting to be met with the terms that you demanded from it. And when you run into a wall, you cry.
Yeah.
But the wall told you it was there. It was clear. There were clear signs it was there. And you're going to keep running into it until you're willing to admit that there's something outside of yourself that is above your will. And you just have to deal with it.
Yeah, we're living in a different world now. You know? They see the wall. They're about to run into the wall. And instead of admitting that the wall is there and changing course, what they're trying to do is tell all of us, you guys go over there.
And run into it as well.
Run into that wall in front of me. Try to break it down and move it out of my way. Do something, right? Yeah, you're not accepting reality is the greatest description of a lot of the people that we now have in the world. And it's truly sad to watch. I don't understand how you can live your life that way, but sheltered, great word to use here. I don't know. Catered to, coddled.
Coddled is one I like.
You know, these people, we're protecting them too. Nobody wants to hurt their feelings. And it's terrifying because this is, once again, the future of your country right here that we're dealing with. The future of this great nation that people died and bled for. It's funny when I see those memes. I guess they're memes where it's like shows a picture of the guys that stormed the beach in Normandy, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy I did that." So now people, can pick their genders, and people can, now that I'm so glad I died on this beach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can open up our borders and let every immigrant in the country in here and every terrorist on the watch list. I'm so happy that my blood is on the sand here for that, right? It's just it's so sad. So yeah, The Gladiator. I've watched that movie a couple of times. I didn't know that about you. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Did they make... I thought they were in talks to make a sequel to that or another one.
I think there is one in creation now. I think I watched the trailer for it. It has some recognizable faces in it too. So I think it'll be good.
Interesting.
I don't quite know what... I don't know what the relation is, if this is like Maximus's son. I have no idea what the setting is, but...
Yeah, because he is dead. They can only go before him.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, no, his son died. Never mind. That was ignorant of me. I should know better.
Right. Well, actually, that was ignorant of me because I was talking about Maximus. I forgot the whole reason the movie went through was because his son was killed, right, at the beginning. So, yeah, I don't know what that's... I don't know. I'm thinking of a different movie. There's one with Denzel Washington right now.
Okay.
And it's a gladiator movie. Denzel, trains the gladiator. I watched the trailer for it the other day. It's out there. I don't think this is that, though. I think it's just a completely different thing.
Okay.
So before we move on, books. Did you read books growing up?
Yeah, I did.
Were you picking these books out, or was it something like Dad would give you books and you'd read them type of thing?
So there's a funny story about that. Dad, he must have been cleaning in the library at home, and he took a bunch of books off the shelf, old books of his, and he set them on my school desk. But he was just moving them. And he left them there, and he went to bed. And so I came downstairs the next morning to start school, and there was a bunch of books on my desk. And I thought, oh, Dad must expect me to read all these. And they were mostly a book. They were a lot of them by C.S. Lewis, a lot of apologetics and philosophy. So I read all of those books, and then I was telling Dad, and he was like, "All right, good for you." I was like, "Didn't you leave those on my?" So that was actually kind of funny.
Wow. That's beneficial. You benefited greatly from an accident. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. And you're saying these books are about philosophy, and you think you learned anything from reading them?
100%. Yeah. One of them was it started me down a path where I started reading a lot of apologetics. It was called the ultimate proof of creation, which you could open to debate if you want, but
sure.
It was written by, I believe he was an astrophysicist, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, to summarize, because it was quite a dense book, he made a presuppositional argument. And what that is basically the idea that in order to question the existence of God, you have to assume the existence of a lot of other things that don't make sense unless God also exists. So he outlines the discontinuity between evolution and the laws of logic. The idea that there is something abstract about logic that applies to reality is very antithetical to the idea of physical, biological evolution. And so when we talk about science, which a lot of evolutionary scientists do, it calls into question our ability to reason at all. And so when you make a rational argument against the foundation for reason that makes sense, you also have no feet to stand on, was his argument.
Interesting that you remembered that. That was years ago, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Now, this is a point when I have to ask you, because obviously anyone that's watching this can see that you have a very wide vocabulary as well. Right?
I try. Yeah.
You are throwing words out there, and I'm questioning my own intelligence. So where do you get your... I know they have these apps where it's like a word a day and this and that, right? Are you into any of that stuff?
I thought about doing it for a while.
Where are you getting your words from, Silas?
I think it's really just been from the books over the years.
It's in your memory. These words are stored in your memory, and you have definitions for them in your head? Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here's a great example then for parents who think homeschooling doesn't work. Okay? And it's a great testament to the young mind and its ability to learn in the right environment and learn greatly. Because, some of the words you threw out just now, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to be honest with everybody on Behind the Glass. I didn't have a clue what they meant, okay? But he threw them out there, and you were intelligent enough to also continue with your explanation of what you were saying that I was able to kind of garner what they meant, you know, through that because you explained it so well, right? A word a day, people. Get the app.
A word a day. Yeah.
Increase your vocabulary. It can't hurt.
No, it cannot.
That's awesome, though. You told Dad about those books, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah. He was like, I didn't leave them there for you, but good on you, buddy. You know? Yeah.
Great work, man. Okay, final question when we're talking about your childhood. And there's probably many more we could ask, but what would you change about your younger years, if anything? If you could go back, raise yourself differently, different state, different city, maybe under different religious rules, would you change anything?
I don't think I would change anything necessarily about the setting. I think there's a few things, I'll say habits that I would change that I now have to like manually override. Whereas if I could go back earlier and just inhibit the actual creation of the habits themselves. I think that's about
What would those habits be?
You know, I have a bad habit in conversations. I'll tell you about one of them, which is...
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Often speaking with people, and I'm going to out myself here.
Yeah, do it live.
If I'm speaking with someone and I'm not interested in talking to them, I say interesting each time they say something, and then I stop.
Interesting.
I just say interesting.
Interesting.
But that makes them want to continue speaking.
Oh, man, that sucks.
So I have to pause and resist that now because it's been trained into me. It's been honed into my my habitual nature. So that's one thing.
So you say interesting, and they feel the need to continue because they think they're interesting.
Because they think that I'm actually interested. I'm usually not interested.
What would you change that to? How do you politely cut someone off and quit talking to them? That's something I haven't figured out yet either. I'll listen to someone far too long, and I'm not interested. I'm already daydreaming of something completely different.
Like when you said, wow, that's crazy, like 5 times in a row, and it gets...
Well... It's been nice talking to you after about Dakota, 3 of those.
You pat your knees.
Yeah. All right. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't get it.
You know what I think? I'm starting to develop this, and I'm not quite as good as I want to be yet. But the idea that, so like if you're, a lot of times people do things that are slightly annoying or uncomfortable. You know, like in public settings, right? And it's not a big deal, but it's just slightly annoying or it's uncomfortable. And I have decided that instead of being the person that is uncomfortable, I think it's okay to be the person that makes other people slightly uncomfortable. And so to that end, I will tell you, you know, I don't know if I'm really interested in talking about that. And I think that's okay to say. Okay. And I don't think that's that hurtful either.
Well, hey, can I offer a different opinion?
Yes.
Or a different perspective? Why not just say, listen, I gotta go, but it's been really nice talking to you. as opposed to putting them down and saying, listen, this is not interesting to me. You know, kind of telling them you're unintelligent and I don't want to talk to you.
Well, it's different. So I think any of those is fine if it's the truth.
You just want to tell the truth.
Telling the truth in social settings is awkward. Like it
It's
gets
weird,
really,
right?
it gets really awkward when someone asks you to help them move, and the only reason you have to not help them is I don't want to.
Right.
You come up with an excuse. You say, "Oh, I'm busy," or No, here's the thing. Here's the thing, and this is something we may as well bring him up now. Alex Hormozy. I watched quite a bit of his stuff.
Absolutely.
And he talks about, he says, try telling the truth in social settings. And it's very empowering.
It's going to be hard.
It's going to be hard, right? Because we are conditioned to be polite. And that's one thing about me. You might not know a lot. I think I have a different reputation with a lot of people because I have a certain attitude, but it's usually for humor. But I am actually a very polite, nice, agreeable person. I'm very reasonable. And I'll go out of my way to make sure that everyone gets a fair, convenient outcome. And I'll try to make things as convenient for other people as I can. That being said, it's not necessarily always advantageous. And just because I have free time doesn't mean other people are entitled to it.
When you described that just now, that sounded terrible. You know, it makes logical sense when you're in the moment to be agreeable, to be nice, to be kind to everybody, to make sure that they're comfortable and they're getting what they want. But to say it out loud and to see it from the third person or to hear it from that point of view, it does sound terrible. You're like, no, you should be a little bit rude. Not rude, but a little bit truthful, which makes things awkward. You know, a little bit more to the point, matter of fact, less about what your feelings and. But that's hard to get to. That's a hard place to get to sometimes.
It is, yeah.
Especially when you're trying to navigate the waters of meeting all these brand new people who love you, and it's
one thing that
trying to make a sale.
Right. Well, one thing that helps, that encourages me, I should say, with this concept is knowing that as I do it, I will get a reputation for being that person, and I won't have to do it as much.
Right, because
they'll know that when I stop talking after you say something and I just nod, that I'm done with this conversation.
I like that.
And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
And I think this is another thing to me is the fragility of people in social settings and how easily offended people are. It takes a lot to offend me. You have to stab me in the back. If I invite you to something and you say you don't want to go, the level of offense that generates for me is zero. Always. Always zero. I don't care.
What if someone calls you the N-word?
I don't know if I would really care. It would depend. It would depend on how they said it. It would depend on who it was. And I probably wouldn't care too much still.
Just walk away. Yeah, I feel kind of the same way. A lot of things are calculated in my head, and I will not let those things come out of my mouth or be registered on my face. But there's a lot going on in my mind as a conversation is taking place or a situation or scenario, and you might piss me off real quick right away. Sometimes my temper can be very short, but I have a great habit of holding all that in and maintaining my composure, and I think that's important as well.
That is actually great. And to put this, I guess, in a new light, it's not that like certain things will offend me. Here's how I put it, and maybe this is just me being biased. I will only be offended if I should be.
That makes sense. That's logical.
I'll only be offended if I should be.
That's also tricky to follow when people start telling jokes. That's where that gets tricky to follow. Because the joke is made to make fun of you and to be hurtful, but some people find the joke funny, so they tell it. And in that sense, it's like, how do I determine if I should be upset? Because logically, I should be. You told something that was offensive to me. It hurts my feelings. I can't help the physical reaction I get from the words that come out of your mouth and how they affect me. But everyone's laughing.
Yeah. Well, so here's one way to look at that. Is I'll look at, and you can read these things if you're not too socially inept. Is you can read whether or not a person intends to be funny or if a person intends to disguise an insult when they say something. And that's different. And part of the way you can discern that is whether or not you have a relationship with a person. So I'm very casual about making jokes on contentious topics with people with whom I'm very friendly. Jokes that I would never make with people upon first contact.
That's why the comedy thing is so hard.
Right.
They'll hit you with it.
Right
Just
away.
met them. Never knew you.
If you paid for it, I think you ought to be quiet, though.
See, that's a great point you brought up. If you bought the ticket to a comedy show, all bets are off the table.
You signed up for this.
You do have to STF you
Yeah.
and just sit there and take that joke.
You do have to take it now. Yeah.
Or you can walk out. Right?
To a certain degree. Right? I mean,
right. The comedian also has a certain level of responsibility that he should adhere to. You don't need to tell every joke.
However,
Okay.
I think if someone makes a joke that most people would agree is funny and you find it hurtful, but only because you're insecure, that's your problem. And you shouldn't walk up on stage and slap a man.
Well,
I didn't say that.
but you threw it but you threw it out there.
Well,
Keep his name out of your mouth.
that was a whole debacle.
It was so stupid.
That was embarrassing.
He should have got his ass whooped as soon as that happened. Or arrested. That's like the technical definition of assault on camera.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Wasn't it live TV?
On live TV.
Yeah.
Doesn't get any more live than that.
No, it doesn't.
Rules for thee, not for me kind of a situation.
Well, right.
You know, the Hollywood elites.
And it's one of those things, too, where you can, like, I could almost guarantee you if Shaq had made that joke,
He wouldn't have got up there to
he
slap.
wouldn't have got up there to slap him.
I don't even think he would have said anything.
I don't think he would have said anything. If it had been The Rock,
The Rock.
I bet he wouldn't have slapped him. He might have said something, but I bet he wouldn't have slapped him. It's because it was Chris Rock, right?
Little Chris Rock. Who you thought you could just push around. Oh, what a weak man you are, Will. And I was pissed, too, because Will Smith, he had a great documentary series on Disney Plus that I was really getting into.
Oh.
And after his little debacle, they canceled his show, and I was pissed at him for that.
What?
So I wanted to
Okay.
watch that documentary.
Huh.
Yeah, so I was
That's
very
disappointing.
selfish in my anger.
Right.
my
You were
righteous
like, now I don't
indignation.
get to watch my show.
Yeah, he ruined things for me, too. Not just him and his family.
Yeah.
There were other people that were affected.
Noted.
Duly noted.
Duly noted.
All right. You want to take a quick break? You need to pee? You need to do anything? Get some more water?
I'm honestly good.
Okay.
Unless you want to.
Is that red light still on?
It's still on.
Then we're rolling. Let's move into the next topic I want to talk about. So, physical fitness and your first business venture at a very young age.
Yeah.
Okay, so Corey, our older brother, started us all out in the field of physical fitness. I would love to say that he is just the godfather of that in this family.
Fair point.
He fostered that one.
Yeah, he definitely spearheaded that expedition.
He started at a young age, and we followed. And that pissed him off a lot of times.
It did. It did.
And it's just like the older sibling, younger siblings. We were all doing everything Corey did.
He wanted to have his own thing, and
he wanted his own life, and he had a bunch of little minions following him around. Well, I'm sorry.
But now
Not
I'm sure
really.
he's grateful that we're all strong, healthy individuals that are of, physical capability, and that's definitely good for him because we all helped him move.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
yeah, he loves it now, and we love him, and he loves us. Everything's good. It was just the little
Yeah.
sibling rivalries.
oh yeah, always there.
So, when did you become interested in working out? And do you think exercise is a positive or a negative in regards to your mental strength and health? Maybe the first part of that we'll start with. When did you become interested in it?
I think it would have been I think I started when I was 15. I probably had an interest before that, but I didn't quite know how to do it. I think mom has an old video of me like just doing push-ups because I was trying to get something going
Nice.
when I was really little. But
You had nothing, by the way.
had nothing going on. And I think starting at about 15, and I've been pretty consistently disciplined with that. One thing I have learned from it, and I would say it's definitely been a positive for my mental resilience, probably even more so than my physical resilience, is realizing that there's an ebb and flow, there's a give and take, and there's ups and downs to it. And I'm kind of able to extrapolate that to life. So you go to the gym, and if you do what you're supposed to do, then you make the progress that you want. But you can also go too far, and you can hurt yourself, and you can set yourself back. And I've had that happen too. And there's a saying for that too, I heard recently on a podcast. And he said, and you can use whatever name you want, but he said, Oliver will go far, provided Oliver does not go too far. And the idea behind that is
that Alex?
no, actually,
Okay.
it's Andrew Huberman
Oh, I
quoting
love that
someone
guy.
else. Andrew
Okay.
Huberman, yeah, really great guy, awesome to listen to, super intelligent,
Yeah, he is.
super intelligent. But for me, that's always been one of my issues, and I saw this with my fitness is I never know that I've gone far enough until I know that I have gone too far. That is kind of where my intensity sits at on the scale. To me, it just makes sense if I want to get something to maximize all of the probability to get it.
Right.
And that takes focus, and you cut out other things, and you say no to this and you say no to that because you're going to say no to anything that isn't the goal. But it can get to a point where you're too unbalanced, and then you get hurt. You take it a little bit too far. But is a very valuable lesson for me because I can now take the lesson from the physical and apply it to business and apply it to relationships and apply it to life philosophy, which is that you can be too rigorous and hurt yourself and set yourself back. And so I'm much more mindful now of mistakes like that in other areas of my life.
It's a great example of it, yeah. Great explanation.
Mm-hmm.
You went to gyms, correct?
Yes.
You didn't have like a home gym set up. You actually went to gyms.
Yeah.
How do you appreciate working out around other people like that? It was always something I hated more than anything. I'm a very introverted person when it comes to hanging out with random people. I don't like crowds. I don't like going to concerts. You know, I sit in the back, very back of a movie theater at the top in the corner.
Yep.
And I have my gun with me. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't say that on camera, but it's in there now.
It's in there now.
How do you like working out at a gym that's packed full of people like that? And did you ever have problems with people working out in that environment, or do you like being around people working out? Are you introverted or extroverted?
It's a question I've never. I mean, you'd probably be able to easily classify me as more introverted. It's not that I don't like people. I like people, but I just don't need them. And then to add on to that, I guess, I tend to like people until they want to hang out with me too.
My God.
And then I'm like, I don't know if I have time for you.
I can relate.
And it's no offense, but it's just suddenly they're like, I like you and we should hang out. And I'm like, Kevin, I don't have time.
No.
And it's no offense to you. So there's that. I definitely think as far as people at the gym, I haven't encountered too much trouble. I had one guy who was annoying, another guy who was annoying. Some people are annoying, but they're far and few between in my experience. I don't mind working out in a full gym so long as I can get to the equipment that I want, which is often the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't encounter too much annoyance there.
Were you a morning or an afternoon person?
You know, for the longest time, I was like an afternoon or evening person because of my schedule. Now, recently, I've been going around 9 o'clock in the morning because I have the time to do that. And I wasn't expecting to like it, but I do like it. And I like to have it done because the gym is one of those things I have to do it, and it just has to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And so once it gets done, then everything else that's more complicated or requires more intellectual ability, I can focus on more because I don't have to think about, when do I have to stop so that I can go to the gym today?
Right.
You know?
Were you as focused on your diet as you were the gym routine? Were you trying to count calories and take your protein shakes and all this nonsense that everybody hates so much?
Yeah, I was very disciplined with that for the longest time. I think I was doing 4,000 calories a day, probably more than that, because I was underestimating some of the calories from snacks, most likely. Made sure to do it as cleanly as I could. So I was eating pretty regimented meals of chicken and rice, steak and rice, fish, like as many like clean animal sources of protein as I could, eggs, and then tracking my calories and my macros. So I was getting enough carbs, enough protein, enough healthy fats. Easy way that I would use to get in more calories often would be a smoothie. And then fats, for anyone who doesn't know, fats are your most calorie dense macro, and nuts are fats. Almonds, walnuts, cashews. So I would often throw in, because I like nuts, I would often throw in walnuts into my smoothies to up the calories, get my fats, and also make it taste better.
How are you tracking your macros? Do you have an app?
I had an app, actually. I think it was called MyFitnessPal.
Oh, yeah.
Or no, it was called MyPlate. It was actually Corey's suggestion.
Really? Was it free?
It's free. Yep. There's paid versions, but for what I needed, the free version was perfect.
You know, that's what a lot of people miss out on is the diet aspect of working out. You know, people say, I go to the gym all the time. I do this and I do that as they shovel a pizza into their mouth for the 20th time this week. You know, it's the diet that catches us all.
Right.
And that age-old statement of the gym is, 10% and the diet's 90, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Those ratios, it's true. What you put in your body, all that fuel, your whole hour-long workout can be destroyed with one cheeseburger. You know? Calories gone.
If you're... That's the thing.
Maybe not one cheeseburger. I'm being real strict.
Well, no,
with it,
I mean, it depends on what your dietary restrictions are. Because the thing is, like, you can... If you are, so assuming a person is training well, which most people are not, when they say this, they're like, oh, I'm doing this, you're probably not training how you should be. But anyway, let's say you are, for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're training properly and you're progressively overloading and you're not making progress, then it means that the factor which is limiting your progress isn't your fitness, it's the food that you're eating. And you're not willing to adapt that so that it will suit your goals, because sitting down at home after a long day of work and the gym and not being able to eat your comfort food is more difficult than you think.
Oh, yeah.
It's very difficult, actually.
It's damn near impossible for some people.
And it's also hard because getting good food that fits your macros and your calorie restriction is harder than getting food that is cheap and convenient. It actually takes more work because you often have to prepare your own food if you're not willing to pay for a meal prep service, which is far more expensive than getting a frozen pizza.
Right. It's key, man. It is in the diet and nobody wants to accept it. Caloric deficit is a thing, and you do need to count your calories if you're trying to lose or gain weight.
100%.
It's important. The question I had, if you can't do, what was the term you used? Overload?
Progressively overloading?
If you can't do that, right, which, explain that term, first of all. It's where you're bumping up your weight, right?
Basically, it's like where you do more than you did the time prior.
Right,
Yeah.
so For those people who are in the situation where it's like, I'm at home, I'm in my home gym, I only have weights that go up to 40 or whatever, I've got little dumbbells here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you progressively overload in that scenario?
That's a great question.
More reps?
So, yes.
Slow down?
What
do you do
if you want to
grow?
This is one thing I love to talk about because there's a lot of different variables that you can change to increase the intensity of an exercise. So you could increase the weight, you could increase the volume, you could increase the eccentric portion, which is the negative, or the downward, right? Or you can leave all of those things the same, and you can decrease the amount of rest that you give yourself between sets. And if you're like, oh, I wasn't even tracking that, now start tracking that.
Set a timer on your watch, 30 seconds now, boys. It's no longer 3 minutes.
And then that's the thing is when you start measuring, you can know whether or not you're making progress. And the thing that's scary about that is you'll also know when you're not making progress.
Right.
And so then you're more accountable. You'll be like, well, I squatted one more rep, but I actually rested another 5 minutes before the set than I normally do. So it makes sense. So I'm probably not stronger. I just rested another 5 minutes before the final set.
Right. And it's pretty insane to once you do start tracking stuff like this, you find out how quickly your body will adapt to different pressures and resistance and different training. And you're like, oh, my God, I really do need to keep switching this up. I need to step up the intensity. I'm going to have to do more reps.
Right.
So people are like, how in the hell do you do an hour and a half in the gym? That gets pretty easy when you're actually working out in the gym.
100%. Yeah,
and that
100%.
time will go by, and you're like, geez, man, I got to get these sets in. Right? So, yeah, that's I'm happy that we covered that because there are a lot of people I've had ask, they've only got so much. You don't have a full gym at your house. You maybe don't have time to go to the gym. You don't want to pay for it, whatever, and you have a simple setup at home. And you're like, well, I can lift all of this just fine with no issue. I need to do my progressive overload, and I need to step this up. I want to gain more. What am I supposed to do? Well, you just got your answer.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah.
Do more reps, whatever. Everything Silas just listed, go back and rewatch this segment.
Yeah.
We're helping you guys out. Okay, so you kind of covered this earlier, but what is the gym on the priority list of your average day right now?
So I like to organize my day from start to finish in terms of what is the most important to affecting the most critical goal that I have. So I start out and I'll have my reading in the morning, and then I'll try to immediately get to the most critical work, which is usually, at this stage, prospecting. So make sure I get my minimum, whatever it is, if it's 4 hours of cold calling or if it's 100 emails, whatever form that takes.
To back up a little, how much reading do you do and what are you reading? You say first thing in the morning.
I'll usually read because I get up between 5 and 5:30 in the morning usually. And I'll read from about 5:15 to 6, so maybe a good 45, 30 minutes in the morning. And I usually just read and pray, Bible scriptures, and have a cup of coffee while I do that to start the day.
Nice. Okay.
So, yeah. And that leads me into my work, grab my laptop, and I start working as soon as I can. If it takes me 2 or 3 hours to do, 100 emails or whatever it is that I'm doing that morning, then I'm done by 9 with the thing that basically keeps me alive, which is if no one knows about me, no one can work with me. So I have to make sure I tell people every day. And if I'm not doing that, then eventually I will lose any momentum that I've built.
Right.
So that's why that's very important, and it's done very early in the morning for me. After that, it depends on what's on the calendar. But if I have time, that's usually about 8 or 9 o'clock, like I was saying, and I'll go to the gym recently to make sure I get that out of the way, go for about an hour. I come home, shower, get dressed. I either go to the office or I have appointments, phone calls, things like that. And then I try to make sure that I'm being proactive. So I'm not just doing things, but I'm also trying to improve the things that I'm doing which requires, it's like when people say, oh, are you working in the business or are you working on the business?
Right.
So in the field that I'm in, as an independent contractor, you are your own business. And so it's very easy to get caught up being the business and not being the business owner, where you improve things and you improve the systems and the schedules and the routines rather than just acting them out.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. You're a little bit slimmer than you have been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like that better than being all swolled up and heavy? How heavy were you at your heaviest?
I was like 216,
What are you at right now?
like 180.
Which one do you prefer?
I would probably be okay. I would feel better at 205.
Okay.
But I do think the reason I wasn't as happy as I wanted to be at 216 was just the body composition that I had. And I wasn't fat, but I was definitely more fat than I am now. But I was also more muscular.
You were a thick boy.
I was thicker than 10 Snickers.
My God,
back in the day.
I couldn't believe it. Every time I come home, I'm like, damn.
Round face too, boy.
Yeah, your face was holding some of it.
That was the creatine, I bet.
You slimmed down in the face area. It's good for business. It's good for these nice suits.
Yeah. I look like a runner now.
100%. Plus, the cameras are going to put 10 pounds on you.
Right.
If you had to spend the rest of your life in either a gym or a library, which one would you choose?
I would be in a library. And the reason for that is because I can do physical activity to exercise my body in a library, but there would be no books in a gym.
Interestingly enough, that's a point I did not consider when I wrote out that question. But you're right. Body weight squats, push-ups, you can do all that in a library. And you can learn infinitely, so you can keep yourself occupied.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Great choice. I think most people would choose the library, but who wants to spend, oh my God, the rest of your life in a gym? I would go crazy. I'd probably bash my head open on a weight within a couple of weeks.
It could be bad. Yeah, especially if you were there by yourself and you didn't know people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing to comfort you but that cold steel.
Yeah, it's therapeutic, but only so far.
Tell you this much, you better be shredded by the end of your life.
I'll tell you what.
When they come find your dead body in there, that body better be yoked.
Better be at least 200 pounds lean.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
So during the course of you working out and getting involved in gyms at a young age, you started your first company. What was this company and why did you decide to do that rather than focus on making friends, partying, or doing all the other crazy things that young adults do at that age? You started a company. What was it?
So it was a little vending machine business that I started.
Started with a vending machine.
Started with a vending machine. Yeah.
What made you make that decision? What interested you? Did you see videos, people talking about vending machine companies? Did it seem like something that would be simple and quick cash turnaround type of deal? What did you see in that?
What I saw in it was making business accessible to myself. I was like, well, if I make it as small as possible, then maybe someone as insignificant as myself can manage it. So I was like, just a little box, please, and I'll start with that.
How old were you?
I think I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was just about 19 when I did that. It was quite fun. And the things that I learned were, the first things I learned about, the thing was there are certain people who are very successful with it. What is required to be successful as you might want to be, if you wanted to make six figures doing vending machines, you'd have to be very, very efficient. You'd have to know exactly what people want in those locations. You have to be constantly getting feedback, and you have to have like 20 machines, right? Now, that's something you can do.
That's it? 20 machines for six figures?
Well, it depends, because a lot of times it's like, what are you charging for your product?
Sure, yeah. Could be $3 items in there, right?
Right, it could be $3 items. So a lot of times, here's how I looked at it. Because when I was stocking the machine and stuff didn't sell, I was like, there's two variables here. They either don't want what I'm selling, or they don't want it for the price that I am selling it at, or it's both of those.
Right.
So then I'll be like, okay, as far as the price, this is about as low as I can go while maintaining a reasonable amount of profit. So then I will assume it is more likely that they don't want the product. That was tough. One of my mistakes was I would buy stuff that I thought I would like, and other people didn't care about it.
Oh, man. I just want to cut in the world of making videos. That is one of the lessons that I have learned heavily. Stop making things that I think I want to see.
There's something about that. There's something about that.
It's hard. It's hard to train that out of yourself.
Because you do want to, be like, okay, this thing performed better than another thing, right? Say it's a video. You'd be like, but I don't really like that video. I didn't like what I said. And I feel like I probably misspoke and misrepresented myself even.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you still might not want to repeat that. And so this is something, and I'll bring it up again. Alex Hormozy, he talks about content a lot. And he talks about it and relates it to an artist that paints art for themselves. And then the people that happen to like it. But when you're trying to make content and you're trying to figure out the minds of other people, it doesn't work as well.
It does
than when
not.
you make content that you enjoy, and then you can be reliably certain that because there's billions of people on the planet, enough of them will like the content that you enjoy and that you're okay representing.
That is the hope.
That is the hope.
And if you have enough perseverance to stick with it, it's possible you can get there.
It's possible.
You have to be willing to go through the fire.
You do.
When you're talking about something like this, even this podcast, there's only so many people that are going to be interested, and you have to be okay with that.
Right.
If you're going to do like me, I don't know if I'm willing to give up doing the types of videos that I want to do, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to be okay then now if you're not going to cater
Right.
to the rest of the world, and I'm not going to do the TikTok dances, right? And I'm not going to do the things that can grab quick attention, clickbait stuff. You're going to have to be okay with the lower form of views. And
Well, and that's something else. So, here's one thing I like to think about is among the plethora of interests a person might have, the audience that you are trying to reach, if you're trying to reach an audience, they might not have all of the interests you have, but they might have some of them.
Right.
So if I am interested in fitness and philosophy, my audience is primarily interested in philosophy, then when I make a fitness video, I'll get less attention from it. Okay. So that means I'll just keep the fitness personal, and I'll enjoy it myself, and the other thing I'll enjoy will also be my content.
Right.
So the philosophy will also be in the videos. So when you think of it from that perspective, it's really about you. I think to me, and this is what I try to do, is I will only make content that I myself like, but amongst the things that I like, I will only make content about the stuff that gets positive feedback as much as I can. Because you want to learn.
Sure.
And so it's tricky. But I also think it's at the same time, it's do whatever you want. It's your channel.
That's the beauty of it. In all of it, that is the beauty of it. It is your channel, and it should be unique and something that you're interested in doing.
Yes.
Otherwise, what's the point? You become if you start to cater and you start to do the monkey dance for everybody, you become a slave and a servant to this industry, and it's a 9-to-5 job now that you hate. Right? And that's something I never wanted to fall into with this. So that's why I'm just going to continue doing what I enjoy.
Yes.
Yes. Even though I'm aware that it might not give me the results that I want immediately. You might not get that immediate gratification from it in the form of views and subscriptions and all of that. But if you're happy and you love what you do and you do it long enough, you're going to be successful at it.
Yeah, no, completely. I like to think of it because your audience trains you. Because if they like your content, they'll tell you what they like, right?
They give you feedback.
They give you feedback, right? And so the difference between catering and making content the way that you should, I think, is it's the difference between pandering and specializing. So if I'm a doctor and you come to me and you say, well, I want you to do surgery on my leg. I say, well, I'm an eye doctor and I only do surgery on your eye. But if you ever have an issue with your eye, come see me. So I'm specialized in that this is what I do, but I'm not going to pander and now say I'm a general surgeon.
Sure.
Even though I may have some competence, obviously, but that's not my specialty.
Are you saying stick with what I know, Silas? Is that what you're telling people?
Maybe, but not quite.
I mean, a roundabout way of saying stay in your wheelhouse?
Well, I think if you want to be really good at something, you got to be
well-rounded, right?
Yeah, you got to be well-rounded, but you also got to be focused, you know?
100%. Oh, we're focused.
Mm-hmm.
Clean focus.
Clean focus.
Should we continue?
We shall.
I could talk about this stuff all night, though.
I know.
So you did end up selling your business, your first business, right? You ended up getting out of it.
Mm-hmm.
2 questions. Why did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And what lessons did you learn? Maybe those can just be kind of the same damn thing.
No, it's all right. Yeah, no, those can be
Why'd you
different.
sell it, and what lessons did you learn from owning this company?
So...
Because it was an LLC. You were 19. You had a company, right?
Actually, I think so it was interesting. I set out to set up an LLC for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then along that process, because I wanted to open up a business account, right?
Right.
So I went to go do that at my bank. And they told me, well, you need this and this and this. And they said you could do it. They told me I could do it with a sole proprietorship. Okay. No offense to the individual I spoke with, but they didn't know what they were talking about. Interesting. And I couldn't get it with a sole proprietorship. And
you want to throw some names out there?
I actually don't remember their name, but I would recognize them if I saw them.
Interesting.
But in either case, I came back with the sole proprietorship, IEN number and all.
Yeah.
And they were like, actually, this is also insufficient.
Wow.
To get you the account that you want. So I was like, you know what? I'm not making any money anyway. Let me see if I can actually make the vending machine make money, and then I'll worry about an account.
There you go.
So I didn't have an LLC for that, which was really not. I'm not regretting that because it didn't go very far either way.
Right.
But the reason I started it to begin with was because I had a very silly belief about real estate. I wanted to invest in real estate, and I was like, I don't have any money to invest in real estate. So I was like, so I have to start another business to make me enough money to invest in real estate. Now, you can see the flaw in this logic, thinking that before one invests in real estate, one must first scale to a 6-figure vending machine business. That is a prerequisite for investing in real estate. Totally incorrect.
Makes sense to me. Make that money, son.
Right? Well, to that end, because I didn't understand financing at all and what I would have access to, apparently I had good credit. So
nice.
But when I realized that I was only doing the vending machines because I was hoping it would make me able to invest in real estate, and I realized I could just skip that and go straight to real estate, I was like, well, why don't I stop wasting my time with this vending machine? I'm going to sell it. I'm going to go figure out how to invest in real estate.
Nice.
So that was what caused the shift, was that realization.
Okay. How easy was it to sell your vending company?
It was incredibly frustrating.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. There's some very painful memories I have.
Nobody wanted it, huh?
You know what? People on Facebook Marketplace are cheap.
Yeah, that turns out.
And they're scammers.
As it so turns out.
As it so turns out.
2 of the most prominent things on Facebook Marketplace.
Cheap scammers.
Cheap and scammers.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate.
Very unfortunate. But I eventually found some upstanding people who wanted to buy it, and we worked out a reasonable, fair agreement, and they bought it, and it worked out okay for them too. And now they are selling it, which is hilarious to me.
That is hilarious.
It's actually on Facebook Marketplace.
Starting to see a trend here.
Seeing a trend here.
Yeah. With the vending machine business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's great, man.
Mm-hmm.
Finally got out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was another question I was going to ask you about that.
Mm-hmm.
I might have.
What did I learn from it?
Yeah, there was that one too, which you can answer.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn from all of this?
You know, I think
Business-wise, maybe.
the thing I learned was I learned several things, but they were only applicable to vending machines. The thing that I really learned was when I tried to sell it. You know, like when you go to give something away or when you go to sell it, like you clean it up and you make it a lot nicer than it was for you when you were using it.
Right. Some people do that.
Some people do that.
People who are decent human beings.
People who are decent do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I realized that I should treat things as if I were preparing them to be presented to other people while I own them, so that I get the most benefit out of owning them.
Oh, yeah.
So there were a few things that I fixed on the vending machine because I got used to working with the quirks of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I realized it was so much easier to run it when it wasn't broken.
That makes sense.
Right?
Kind of like most things, right?
Yeah, like most things.
Did it break down a lot?
No, it didn't break down per se. So the way it dispensed beverages was very odd.
Oh, the mechanism inside.
The mechanism inside. And so there are a few ways you could adjust that, and I fixed some of it. There were some minor things, screws missing here and there to keep things kind of in line. Simple things.
Sure.
That I was like, you know what? It's not making any money. I'm not fixing it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's great that you just said that because that was going to be my final question for this. Did you ever end up making any money whatsoever on this business venture?
So
did you come out positive in the red or in the black on this?
I was definitely in the red technically because what I did was I financed it, not because it was very expensive, but it just made sense. So I had a secured loan with cash in an account in a CD that was collateral for a loan that I got as a personal loan, right?
Ah.
So what happened with that was I think that was like $150 a month. So not terrible. And it would usually do like a $175 a month. Now that was gross.
Wow.
But that wasn't net.
You're netting off of that.
So the issue was that I would spend money to buy products to stock it, and it would do $175 gross, but then you would also have to deduct the $50 I spent on stocking it. So it was paying the loan, but it wasn't paying for the products also.
Which could have been fixed if you just increased your cost, right? But your customers weren't wanting the product.
They weren't wanting the product enough. Well, I mean, it's like, even I was like, I wouldn't spend $5. You know, at a certain point, I'm like, if anyone buys it for this price, I'll be baffled.
Right. It makes you wonder, all the vending machines that are out there. You're like, geez, man, these people must really be dedicated to this business.
They are.
Because they're holding firm, and they still exist everywhere. I still see vending machines all over the place.
Yeah.
You wonder how well they're doing, but that's between them and God at this point.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So, would you recommend starting a vending machine company to a young individual? And if so, what would they change from what you did?
So, I'll tell you one thing. Get a vending machine that has DEX capability. So what that is when the machine dexes, and it's been a minute since I've gone through this in my head, so you may have to take it with a grain of salt. But basically, it logs all of the activity of the inventory in the machine, and it sends it to a server that you can access through whatever software you operate your card reader on, is basically what happens. And so you can get a lot of data from that that'll help you strategize for how you sell things. Otherwise, you're in there and you have to go physically check the machine each time you want to know what's going on, what's in the coils, and whatnot. And it's more physically burdensome to operate.
Okay.
So that'd be one thing. Also, get something that's American made. I would recommend that. I'm not going to say who made mine.
Hey, man, throw it out there. People, so they can avoid it.
It was China.
Oh.
So
interesting.
And also, there's two big, from what I understood with my research initially, there's two big companies that supply card readers for that type of thing. There was Nayax, and there was Cantaloupe. Nyax looked really good. Nyax seemed to be the bigger company. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go with Nyax. So I called him, couldn't get a hold of nobody, couldn't get no help. Literally for days, couldn't get a hold of anybody. I was like, all right, let me see. Called Cantaloupe, got somebody. I was like, you just got my business.
Wonderful customer service.
Wonderful customer service. They actually have people at the phones.
It matters.
It matters.
Who'd have thought?
Right?
When you're running a company, who'd have thought your reachability was important?
Right? It's crazy.
Your availability, I guess I should say. Yeah. That's crazy, man. Well, I'm glad you learned that lesson for me and all of us that are listening to this right now because we are learning from you. And here's one question before we end that. Do you feel like you've learned any more about the vending machine business now that you've had to teach us all about your failures? Going back to what we were talking about at the beginning. You're teaching us all about the terribleness and Are you learning anything yourself in this?
I'm definitely being reminded of some painful lessons that I learned. That's for sure.
That's great. That's great. Okay. You did have a job during all of this, right? It was your first job ever while you were also starting a vending machine company, right? You were working full time.
I was working full time. Yep.
And that was your first job ever?
Yes. Yeah, technically.
Do you want to get into that job and what you were doing?
Sure. Yeah.
You don't have to, tell
Be
the
too
station
specific.
and everything. So you were working at a TV station, right?
Yeah, I was working at a local TV station. And I think I started working there part-time when I was 17, and it would have been the year 2019 when I started working with them. Part-time on the morning shift. I worked there for a good 5 years, almost 5 years. Mostly, I think for the bulk of the time, I was a director of newscasts, is what they call it. So it basically meant that during a broadcast, what the director does is they're responsible for putting everything on air and ensuring that it goes to air appropriately, communicating with the team, keeping everyone on task, and making sure that we hit our deadlines for timings, breaks, as well as dealing with the odd, technical difficulties. So,
did you have any years of training in college and technical school for this job?
I did not. I had 0, actually.
Threw you in there.
They threw me in there. Yeah.
How difficult that must be. First of all, remind everybody how old you are right now.
21 years old.
Isn't that
currently.
crazy?
Yeah.
This is like an interview with someone who's like 50, experience-wise and what they've done in their life. 21 years old right now. So you didn't go to school for camera equipment and audio, none of that nonsense.
No, sir.
You started working at this job. It was kind of on-the-job training.
Yeah, very much so.
How hard was that for you?
At first, it was quite hard. So, funny story about that. I was at the news station at a different capacity, not as an employee of the news station when I got offered a part-time position. And as I started working, I started to learn about the equipment that I was usually just around but never interacting with. And the director board, the switcher, when I started, it was a Vision board, but we upgraded to a Ross touch drive, and I helped install that actually, and I'll talk about that later. But
nice.
I remember looking at that before I ever started working there and thinking, man, I could never do that. That was my thought. And interestingly enough, unless they lied to me, I actually became both the youngest but most experienced and highest paid director in the history of the department.
Sounds about right to me.
That was actually a lot of fun, though. Directing was a fun job.
Really? So did you have a headset and you'd tell people action?
Not quite action. So what I would do is basically as we're coming in out of a break to start a show, I'm in the talent's ear through an IFB is what we call it, so they can hear what I'm saying. And I would speak to them. I would give them a countdown. I'd say 10 seconds, stand by, and go through it like that. And they'd be like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, rolling. And you do things like that, and you go through it, and you go through the steps. A lot of times I was famous for doing my countdown because I had a good voice over the headset.
Yeah,
People thought.
I felt incredible just now, man. I wanted to start reading the news.
Yeah, right? No, it's great fun. It's great fun. And there's a lot that goes on in the control room behind the scenes that is very well hidden, but it's truly the brains of the operation. Now, obviously, you have producers that, how we say, stack the show, which is basically putting the scripts and stories in order for the anchors to read, and sometimes the anchors are the producers. But in either case, if you have a producer who's separate from an anchor, and they usually sit in and booth the show from the control room, so they help the director keep track of times. That's actually very common. Where I worked, it ended up being something that fell on the director's shoulders to keep the show on time. Ordinarily, there'd be a producer there, but if the producer is not up to par, or if the producer is absent, you have to at least know how to do that. So that was something that I had to be much more involved in than I think is standard for the industry.
Right.
But there was that aspect of it. And from there, you learn quite a bit about the systems that you're using, because it's often the case, because we're on the air a lot of the time, which means things are constantly running, computers are on, you have malfunctions, so you kind of learn how to maneuver those and still get through a show when things break, when your CGs are down, when your expression's down, when there's issues with your audio board, or there's issues with the mics, or there's issues with your macros in your board, how to address those things. So from that experience, because at the time that I was maybe I'd been doing it 2.5, 3-ish years as a director, something like that. There was, let's say, some deficiencies in the engineering department in terms of staff. They didn't have enough people. They kind of scouted me from that department, and they set me up to work as a broadcast engineer. So once I stopped directing, and that was a long process, because I had to train new directors to direct the shows that I was previously directing. Luckily, I had some decent students, so that wasn't too bad, but it took time because they didn't really want me to leave the department secretly, I think, because it was inconvenient, which I understand. But I kind of had to force my way out. So
You were looking for more money? Was that the opportunity, or you just wanted to learn more, or they just wanted you to have this new position and you wanted to help them? What was the...
That's a good question. I was interested in seeing whether or not I could do the job, because I knew being an engineer was harder. And I also knew that I would have a little bit more autonomy. I'll say that.
Okay.
A little bit more autonomy, because you're expected to be able to be an independent problem solver and respond to technical difficulties and emergencies in an efficient manner and keep things on track, which is what I was used to doing as a director. But being a broadcast engineer, you have a higher expectation of technical knowledge, which was definitely difficult and stressful. But it was an interesting challenge. And the head of the department that I worked with, he was an engineer. He was probably, I think he'd been an engineer for longer than I'd been alive. Very experienced individual, very intelligent, a very rare blend of intelligent and humble, which was so rare to find there. So he was great to work with, great mentor. Absolutely loved working with him. Aside from that, though, what happened when I got moved to that position eventually was the previous engineer who vacated was occupying one of two positions that were meant to be filled by engineers in that department. So there were two offices, basically. And at the office I was at, when I got hired on, I was actually the only engineer in the department. And the other office was a distance away, so it would take a drive. Like, you wouldn't have anyone there instantly. So as a new engineer I was also the only one in the office.
Wow.
So that was also a challenge, though, where I was like, I don't have someone here to teach me every day either. So I kind of have to be able to figure it out and do it at the same time.
Is that standard practice for them to just throw someone in without properly training them or having a mentor for a certain period of time?
So I will say, again, the head of the department, he would, especially the first few weeks, he drove to the office that I was working at and made sure to show me the ropes and get me updated. And he was always reachable by phone for me, especially. And he made sure that I was aware that it was never a bother for me to call him, because he knew if I was calling him, it was an actual problem.
Okay, yeah.
So there was that. So
Okay.
he tried to set me up to succeed as much as possible, but it definitely was not necessarily optimal either.
Did you ever end up regretting the decision to move over to that?
For other reasons, not necessarily because of the nature of the job itself, but weirdness with office politics and relationships with other people and how you interact with them. I did very much resent showing up. Like, I would literally like get to work and I would sit there and I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I can't do it. I was like, I couldn't do it. And it was so difficult. And I would like try and like, all right, put a smile on, and you go into the office and you just got to do this job that you don't know how to do, and everybody's counting on you, and you also don't like that person, you don't like that person, but you got to help them, and that person's this and whatever it is.
Oh man, that's hard.
Yeah.
It's usually the point when you know you need to leave a position or a job or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to that point when there's just hatred in your soul for
Yes.
showing up at this place. I've
Yeah.
dealt with that on several occasions.
Mm-hmm.
That leads into one of my next questions. When it comes to a television operation, a news station or whatever, did you find that people were putting on a face on camera and off camera? They were horrible people. Like, you hear that a lot. Oh, he's such an awesome reporter, but behind the scenes he's just horrible to the staff. He yells, he screams, he's terrible. Did you find any of that working for this place? Two-faced people?
I think especially the on-air talent. A lot of people don't know this, but unless you're like really, really big, like, it's not an industry that pays a bunch of money necessarily. So the type of people it attracts are people that want attention often, not always. I've met very, very many genuinely kind and beautiful people that were probably better than they are perceived on air, off air.
Okay.
I would say that's definitely the case for a lot of them. There were the odd people who were incredibly narcissistic, controlling, insecure, egotistical people. Especially there was an individual who was kind of a short guy, but like clearly had a Napoleon complex about him, and he was very difficult to work with. I got used to fighting with him.
Wow.
So he would throw a fit on air, and it would be about something to do with, how the show was being run. And I was either directing at the time, or I was training a new director to direct that show so I could direct a different one, because I didn't want one director for both shows, because then you're too important and you're hard to replace.
Right.
But in any case, he threw his fit, and I was in the control room, and we would usually have a post-show meeting after each show, right, to talk about what went wrong, what could we improve, anybody have any feedback, right? So I knew it was going to come up in the meeting. So I told everyone before, I was like, listen, I'm going to fight with him, and it's going to be fine. I got it. so I was just like, that was normal for me. At a certain point, I was like, and I went out there, like, I was like, I had my points in order, like, I was ready to shred him. And then he was like, he kind of like let it go, and I was like, all right, this is nice.
Smart decision.
Smart decision. Really.
You're still alive.
Because he was doing something stupid where he was... So basically, we have an audio board, right? Where we can turn on or off a mic, and what that basically does is it's whether or not the audio from the mic transmits over air, what we call program in production.
Right.
What he was doing was, in a commercial break, he would go to the bathroom, and he would mute his mic, the physical mic that he was wearing, and then he would come back and he would start talking.
And leave it muted.
But he would leave it muted, and we wouldn't have his audio, and then he would go and unmute it, right?
Right.
And so during that, it happened twice in the show, and the third time, if I'm not mistaken, I spoke to him in his IFB from the control room, and I said, hey, or whatever his name is.
I'll mute that. I'll beep it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll beep it. Yeah.
He said, or I said to him, I said, stop muting your mic. When you want to go to the bathroom, we'll take you out of queue, which is where we can hear the audio from the mic, but it doesn't go over air. Because he wanted to have privacy in the bathroom. Makes total sense. I'm like, you can either remember to unmute it or stop doing that because you're sabotaging our show. It's a self-sabotage, and
Fair.
You want to get angry at me for addressing it. So in any case, how do you expect us to be vigilant? Especially these are part-time camera operators we're working with. You expect them to be vigilant against you self-sabotaging and muting your own darn mic.
Right.
No one is prepared for you to trip over your own shoelaces like that.
Not a team player.
That's your fault.
Yeah.
So in any case, I told him, listen, stop muting your own mic. We'll take you out of queue when you want to go to the bathroom. And then when you come back to the set, we'll put you back in queue. Sound cool? Right? And he had an attitude about it. So that's what we were going to fight about. I was going to be like, listen, we're not putting the show in jeopardy. These are discreps. We have to put this into the discrep report, which is basically where we tell everyone what mistakes we made and we email it to everybody in the company.
Nice.
That's what happens.
He doesn't have to deal with that. You guys do.
We write those reports. I was writing those reports.
Aha.
Okay?
Sure.
So in any case, yeah, stuff like that.
Okay. Pretty typical, it sounds like.
Pretty typical.
Dealing with people, like you're saying, that want the attention and they've got some kind of a complex. And now I'm a famous news person, even though it's a tiny little station and you got old ladies watching you more than
I'm like,
likely.
listen, our 12 viewers don't care.
Yeah, legitimately. So one other question I had about this job. Where does a news station get its news from? So, do they have journalists that go out and find the story? Do they buy the story from people? What happens?
So it's a combination of, so one thing that'll happen is a lot of stations are in networks or larger corporations, and what they'll do is they share stories between each other. But also, obviously, someone has to write the initial story. So you like to have a fully staffed news department full of competent journalists that are able to go out and write stories, 1 or 2 a day, so that we can generate news and actual information for filling the casts. So that's how that works. A lot of times where I was working at, especially when I left, I don't think there was there might have been one. I think sales and production were probably staffed okay. Every other department was lacking, especially news. I think they had, in one of our offices, the office I worked at, they only had 1 full-time reporter. Now, if you don't know what you're supposed to have, you're supposed to have a lot, but you have 1.
It's a problem.
That's a problem. And so what ends up happening is the producers who can write stories, but it's not their full-time thing because it takes time to write stories, not just ability, they end up pulling a lot of national content. And so because we're a station that's in a specific area, what you want is content that is as relevant to your audience as possible. And when you pull national content, it's less and less relevant. And so if people want local news, they're not going to tune into you.
Sure.
That's for sure. Because 80% of your content is national.
Damn. What a shame.
What a shame. Right.
Did you notice any kind of political spin at this station? Was there any influence, like, because we all hear fake news, this, that, yeah, these stations are all bought and paid for by such and such, and was that anything or did it all seem like they were kind of being genuine and honest people there? Or did you notice, like, were they telling, don't say anything about that election, or don't talk, like, were you noticing anything like that?
That's a good question. One thing I would say is I don't think anything about our particular writing stood out to me as very biased. I would say some of the commercials we ran, because those are paid for by other people, they pay us for the airtime. What would happen is when I was in engineering, after I had left production, there's a phone in my office, and I was working on my computer on whatever I was, and I would get a phone call. And it was some disgruntled viewer who was upset about the commercials that were being ran, and they were calling me.
Really?
And they were trying to get to speak with someone else, and I was like, listen, I'm not responsible for the ads that we run. I have no opinion on them. And the person that you want to speak with is probably busy.
And doesn't care.
And I can promise you that whatever you say to them isn't going to change the commercials. Now, I didn't say that to her. She's a nice old lady. She's very upset, though. She had already spoken with the person that she was trying to reach, but I think they stopped talking to her.
Do you remember what the commercial was? And why did she have a reason to be upset, or was she just a Karen?
Well, I mean, they were paid for by a particular political party. I can't remember which one they were, honestly, paid for by. But it was because it was a campaign. There was some local election that was on the line, and so people were running advertisements for it, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this person is actually not what they say they are, and there's smear campaigns that are typical of these things.
Sure.
So that kind of stuff, and the viewer was just very, very taken aback by that.
She had too much time on her hands.
She had a lot of time. Well, she was probably retired.
Probably sitting in a nursing home. I'm gonna make a call.
Yeah, she made
call
the call
down to the station.
She got to speak with me. So,
old lady,
mm-hmm.
Don't ever call this station again with your complaints or concerns. We don't care about our customers.
Right. Yeah, and the protocol for
money first
for phone calls was I think I got this from my manager at the time, the chief engineer. Was like, hey, listen, if they start getting angry, and especially if they start cussing, you stop talking and you hang up. That's our protocol. We don't talk to you if you're going to be like that.
I love it.
So it made it really easy for me. If they called with technical difficulties, the trick with that was there were a few tricks with it. The first one is that the viewer always assumes that it's not their equipment, it's our equipment. It's often their equipment. And it's hard for an engineer to explain that their bunny ears are the issue, and it's not our whole TV station that's broken.
What about the tinfoil they got wrapped up on there, though? Still using a tube television?
Yeah. It's
from
like
the early 2000s?
It's like, it's like at a certain level, I don't know. I can't explain to you how a TV works.
Yeah.
And I can't walk you through this over the phone. What I would do is I'd be like, well, in your area, no one else has complained that they aren't getting our signal, which makes it much more likely that the issue is unique to your particular setup. And I say that we're saying it's your fault and not ours in a professional way. And that can be, people don't usually like that answer.
Yeah.
So
my hope is that I'm able to keep up with technology well enough when I get old that I don't do things like that, but that's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
You see old people all the time who just don't get it. And you're like, why don't you keep up? It's because I get why they don't keep up. Because they see this new demonic technology coming out that's destroying the country. And they're like, I'm not going to be involved in that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just am ignorant to it. And then you end up calling TV stations and saying, hey, my TV's not working.
I'm like,
your channel's not showing up, right?
And just for anyone out there, half of like fixing stuff that I did was using common sense. It's very rare, though, however, nowadays to encounter people that have common sense and problem-solving abilities and the ability to isolate and use logic and account for variables, things like that, where it's like, okay, this isn't getting power. Okay, so do we know if it's the fact that there's no power in the outlet, or is it the cord that's actually getting power to the machine? So you'd be like, okay, well, here's an outlet tester. Okay, so we know the outlet's working. Okay, so we had two variables. Now we've solved for one. So it's this thing not working. Okay, so what's not working? And then you just go through.
Could it be that massive gash that's on the side of the
cord? Could it be?
Where it's all sliced and broken up?
Could it be that? Where someone rolled their office chair wheel over the cord over a course of weeks and now it's cut.
Yeah, people.
Yeah.
We live in a different world now. The answer's given to us. too often and too easily. Nobody has to do any research or go find it anymore. So we get used to that answer just
Being provided to
yeah.
you.
You type it in on Google and it brings it up to you, so you don't do any critical thinking. Google thinks for you, you know. So
And by
that's
the
where we're at.
way, the kind of, because here's the thing is too, because there's all these people in the office, right? There's one engineer and it's me. They call me. They only call me when something's not working. And it's always things like, okay, my keyboard, my mouse, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do the most basic things.
Get a new keyboard, change the batteries.
I'm like, did you plug it in? Did you try a different USB port? Like, did you just, like, usually they haven't tried anything by the time they call me. And that's what's annoying. I'm like, did you turn it on? Did you turn it off? I'm like, did you do a reboot? Did you reboot your computer? No. So these are all things I would first do. And there used to be an engineer. I never met him, but I was told about him by someone who had been there longer than me that said, hey, don't ever call me unless you rebooted it first.
Probably a good answer to give most of these people.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever think about calling me unless you reboot. You'd be surprised what a reboot can do.
Literally,
for electrical equipment.
a lot of times I was like learning because I was not educated professionally to do the work. So I was like, I was just trying to learn, what do I need to reboot when this is broken?
Right.
What do I need to reboot when this is broken?
Right.
When I was learning stuff, I was like, okay, when this happens, reboot this. When this happens, reboot this. When this happens, reboot this. Now, obviously, things can get way more complicated than that.
Sure.
But for the everyday problems, you can get by with knowledge like that.
Simple reboot will do.
A simple reboot will do.
People don't get it, man. I can only imagine how mechanics feel. Because we're all ignorant to vehicles, right? Or mostly. And mechanics, they take advantage. I know they take advantage of it, but they also must be completely disgusted by the lack of intelligence of the people that come in.
Or excited.
It's like, how could you not? Oh, they're excited. How could you not know you had to change your oil before 50,000 miles? You know?
Listen.
One of those scenarios.
I've changed my headlight fluid, and that's all that matters.
I need blinker fluid, and I need it now.
Yeah,
I'm low.
All right. Well, we're going to give you the premium air in your tires, though, and that's going to be double.
$150. It's only for you.
But it's premium air, okay?
Yep, and that's at a discount.
You know what's funny is there's people who don't know that we're joking.
We are joking. If you don't know, actually, this is good for you. Okay, figure that one out. Okay? Google it.
Yeah.
Why did you eventually quit that job?
So, there's a number of reasons. I'll give you two. The first one was that the entire experience I had there was something that fell in my lap. It wasn't something that I pursued because I wanted to pursue it. So I was there for other reasons, and then someone offered me a job. And then I worked my way up because that's what you do. And then I get offered another job that I wasn't going to apply for. Right? So there was something else that was falling in my lap, and I just made the best of it. At the time that I was leaving, because I explained my interest in real estate, there was an individual who was very familiar with the real estate industry in our area, and I wanted to get some advice. So I was like, hey, I would like to buy you lunch wherever you want, whatever time works for you, and I just want to ask a few questions if you have the time. Tried to make it as easy on him as I could. And really, he was really nice about it. So we ended up getting to sit down and talk about some things. And that individual helped me make my exit because they basically told me that if I did a couple things, they would have a place for me to work at their place of business. So they gave me another opportunity to get out while pursuing what had been my interest the entire time.
Which was?
Real estate.
Nice. Wonderful. And what a great way for you to capitalize on someone who's in your vicinity, who has more knowledge than you, has more skills, has business opportunities. You know, that's probably one of the greatest things that a lot of adults miss out on, I think, is to understand and recognize when someone knows more than you, has more experience than you, to not turn your nose up at individuals like that, or
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can do it by myself, as opposed to just going to that person, asking them for help, asking them if they're willing to share a little bit of that knowledge with you,
Yep.
a little bit of the insight. I'll buy you lunch.
Yeah.
I'll make this work for your schedule. Just please help me learn here,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy where a simple question like that can take your life.
It is.
It's pretty insane.
Ask.
A little bit of humility
Yeah.
and curiosity can go a long way.
Yeah, I posted something recently where I said, I've never considered myself very intelligent. I just listen to intelligent people that I can trust, and I do what they say before I try and reinvent the wheel, and I don't delay action.
Makes perfect sense.
So it's a major shortcut, and it's really a life hack. If you can be humble enough to be teachable and ask people that are ahead of you and know more than you, and then take their advice, and you'll be ahead.
Yeah. It's going to make a difference in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
I have regrets in my life because I didn't do exactly what you said you just did, and I had that opportunity and I didn't take it.
Mm-hmm.
And that regret is never going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Making the decision, and if you fail at making, you take a step in a certain direction and you fail, you ask someone to help you and you step out on that ledge or you jump off of that cliff and you see what happens. The regret of failing at that is never going to be as bad as the regret of you looking back and thinking, damn it, if I'd have just, I wonder
Right.
what would have happened if I'd have asked.
What would have been?
If I would have tried it,
Mm-hmm.
where could I be right? Like everybody with their little New Year's resolution nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And you get 3 months or 4 months into the year and you're still in debt, haven't worked out,
Yeah.
haven't quit your job, haven't tried your entrepreneurial,
Mm-hmm.
you've done nothing, and you look
Mhm.
back and you go, damn it, if
Mhm.
only, I wonder what I would look like.
That's one thing I wanted to. I just want to say this for everybody. A lot of people let their lives happen to them.
Right.
Don't be that person, because you can take your life in a different direction. And that was what was happening to me, is things were being offered to me. Things were happening, but they weren't my interest. And that's one thing that I've noticed is because I try very hard, I tend to do okay at things, and people interpret that as love or interest or passion when it's really just me brute forcing my way through trying to get something done.
Right.
And so they're like, man, you must love that. And I'm like, no, it's my job. I show up and I do it to the best of my ability, not because I like it.
Right.
And people misinterpret that. That was what was happening to me. Because they thought, well, Silas, you must want a career in this industry. And I was like, never occurred to me. Working here for 5 years, it still didn't occur to me.
Right. Sounds terrible, by the way.
So just throwing that out there. You have to want to go somewhere. And then as soon as you decide where you want to go, like the landscape of life changes and you see obstacles, but you can also see paths and you can see ways around. And so you need to have a direction that you want to go in order to interpret the things around you. Because this could be a wall, or it could be, if it's not in your way, it's just a path. It's just the mountains outline the path that you follow. The things that you can't go around, you go between them. And that's your path.
Mm-hmm. Valuable information. Don't live your life with regret. That regret's never going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And contrary to popular belief, people always say, it's never too late. It's not true. At a certain point, for a lot of opportunities in your life, it's going to be 100% too late. You now no longer can take advantage of those opportunities. You no longer have the physical health. You
Yep.
no longer have the years on your life.
Mm-hmm.
You no longer have the financial capabilities. You no longer have the time.
Yep.
You no longer have the ability to take advantage of these opportunities. So the term "it's never too late," that's not true. It's gonna be too late, and you should live your life that way. At a certain point, for all of us, it is gonna be too late, and the regret's not worth it. I'll say that much.
Yeah. Live your life with some urgency.
Live your life with some urgency. You have far less time than you think. I saw a quote the other day and talking about how people think when I get to 50 years old, my life is halfway over. No, your life is like 75% over.
Yeah.
If you're lucky. Might be more than that at 50.
Mm-hmm.
You know, think about that. Wrap your brain around that one, okay? You
That's
have
tough.
far less time than you think you do, and you don't know how much time you have, period.
Yes.
Tomorrow might be the end of the road,
Right.
right? And that should come into play, too, when you're thinking about your family and your friends and your loved ones and the last interaction that you have with them. It's too often people look back on someone who's dead and they say, man, the last thing I said to that person or the last thing I didn't say, I wish.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That regret, never going to be worth it.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end here. 2.5 hours into
2.5.
this. I'm just going to ask a few things because you are just pretty fresh into your new journey of doing real estate. So this is kind of the newest chapter of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You had to get your realtor license first, right? Is that kind of the first step you took into this journey of real estate?
Kind of, sort of. In terms of the actual position I'm working in, that's definitely the first step is you got to go through your, at least in the state we're in, I don't know if it's that vastly different in other states, but you have to do your pre-licensing, which is a minimum of 90 hours. Once you get the certificate from completing that and you pass the course, you present that to whatever administrative body needs to see it in order to prove that you qualify to actually take the tests. Upon taking the test, then you can actually, and you can get your results immediately, oftentimes, whether or not you passed or failed. And then you've got a license. Now, there's a whole bunch of things you got to worry about. After that, you've got to have E&O insurance is one thing. I'm assuming that's pretty standard in the industry, but it's definitely, for North Dakota, the standard. And if you don't know what E&O insurance is, it's an errors and omissions insurance. So it's basically coverage for when you make well-intended mistakes, for example, things that are understandable accidents, but can still come back to bite you in the rear end. That's where you get coverage from, and you're actually required to have that.
Boy, insurance for everything in this
everything.
country, man. The insurance game has got to be one of the most brilliant money laundering schemes ever. They're stealing money from you, 100%. It's the legal system using the legal system to legally take your money away from you. That's what insurance is. And yes, although it's beneficial, they are price gouging, 100%.
Well, it's like, because it's the thing, it's very, like with life insurance, it's very easy to make an argument. It's like, hey, you are going to die.
Okay.
Now, and they'll get emotional. They'll be like, because they know how to like twist the knife.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, on the worst day of your family's lives, do you want them to be protected?
You don't want your wife struggling.
Or do you want them to be on top of the heartbreak and the emotional loss to be scraping by with whatever dollars are left? Or do you want them to have something? Right. And it's hard to argue with that.
Sure.
But then the thing is, you can see how it's a very intelligent business model because they sell you a promise that when you die, they'll take care of your family. And they make good on that promise. But people live for decades. So you pay for decades. For example, if you have whole life insurance or if you have term, it depends what kind you have. You pay for this promise of security, and they almost never have to deliver on it.
This is true.
So they make enough money to deliver when they need to, and they make plenty on their top end.
They have great lawyers, too.
Mm-hmm.
There's loopholes in everything. And yeah, you might die in a crazy way, and your family gets money from that. But you know what? They've found other ways to take that beautiful insurance money from you. What's a funeral cost these days?
Huh.
Isn't there a death tax in America?
That
the
sounds
system
right.
has found ways to get your money at every single step of the way. There's a podcast I'm going to do coming up real soon here on probably BTG Squad. And we're going to talk about which I almost hesitate to, but we're going to talk about BlackRock and everything that they own and their involvement in the war in Ukraine.
Interesting.
Oh man, when you trace the steps of a company and you like outline kind of all of the areas that they're covering financially, like
Yeah.
they'll sell you one thing here and then they'll get that money right back from you in a different area.
Yep.
They're very sneaky with doing stuff like that, and it is terrifying to if you actually dig into it.
They have monopolies.
Oh man.
Have a lot of monopolies. They're buying a lot of you said BlackRock, right?
Yeah.
I think they're buying a lot of real estate. Is that?
They're
Yeah.
taking
Well, there's a lot of big.
Oh, they're taking all kinds of stuff.
You know,
they own it's a monopoly that's illegal and it's happening.
Yeah, it's
They're
antitrust laws are a big deal too.
Oh man.
Because you're not, and they're a very big deal for agents, because like even if two different brokers conspire or even have a conversation to talk about, we're going to fix our compensation structures like so, the amount of trouble you can get into, and you don't even ever have to get any money out of it, by virtue of having spoken about it, you are guilty of collusion. And what it is with antitrust laws is a certain thing that applies to it. It's per se, which means you are guilty by virtue of having colluded, and you don't even need to have executed on it, which means you're guilty on your face. You don't get to mount a defense. You're just guilty right now.
Wow.
We don't need to go to court. You're guilty. Did you talk about it?
Sentenced?
Well, I mean,
What's
you
the
might not
penalty for this? Is it just a fine?
fines. For example, it could be that for like something like 10 years, in addition to whatever fines, for 10 years, a government official will come to your office once a week and like be there.
You're on probation?
Kinda. You can
Explain this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You're a brokerage firm.
Mm-hmm.
To break this antitrust law, what's the scenario that occurred?
Sure. Okay, so say Best Homes. I just made that up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
Best Homes and Bright Homes.
Best Homes and Bright Homes, right? The two brokers meet up and they have lunch because they're friends.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about, I think that if we standardize, and they say it like that, the compensation structures that we negotiate in our contracts, we would be more productive.
Ah.
And so they say, well, let's do that. And they shake hands and say, okay, sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
So standardized meaning we're both going to make sure we have the same prices?
Exactly. So that would be price fixing. There's lots of different types of violations. There's price fixing. There's market allocation. There's tie-in arrangements. All of these things are violations of antitrust laws, and they're subject to extreme repercussions, both financially and for,
Don't gas stations do that? Don't they all get together and say this is what the price is going to be?
No, not
I
technically.
heard that somewhere.
I mean, they might. I mean, I'm not saying I know that they do or don't, but they could. Sure. And
I wonder if they don't have to abide by that same rule, though.
No, that would be illegal, yeah.
Sounds like it.
Uh-huh. Now, it's different when the market determines what a fair market value is, and that's like typical for what will be charged. But it's also different with agents and compensation structures, because by law it is fully negotiable.
Sure.
So if I want to negotiate for 0.05% compensation, that's legal. And if I want to negotiate for 8%, that's legal. It's all up for discussion.
Nice.
However, the probability that someone says no to me asking for an 8% compensation structure within a listing agreement is lower and lower, because people don't want to pay that much necessarily. Or they at least want to know why they're paying a lot more than what is the typical, even though it's not the industry standard rate.
Sure. Wow. What does that insurance cost you per month?
It's actually not that expensive.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think I initially paid, what was it? A $90 fee. And I think you renew it annually.
Okay.
Yeah. So not terrible.
Good.
Yeah.
So it's not that, well, you said 90 hours minimum. How many hours did you do?
Did 135 when I studied for mine.
Is that part of an Alex Hormozy mentality of overstudying to achieve your goal, or what made you do 130 when the minimum was 90 and most people probably just do 90 and try to take the test, right?
So the way the pre-licensing course works is there is a final that you have to pass in order to actually get your license. So if you're at your 90 hours but you haven't passed your test, you can take it as many times as you want. And then if that takes you another 10 hours to pass, then you're now at 100. So whatever it was for me, the issue I was coming home from the gym after work and I would study for 3 or 4 hours, right?
Okay.
And then what would happen is if I was partway through a lesson and I had to stop because I had to go to bed because I had to get up early, what I would do the next day is I would restart and reread that lesson. And that added up over the weeks of me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I wasn't understanding the hour.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes more sense. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. And you aced this test, apparently, from what I hear.
Yeah. Well, I passed it the first time. I think they said something like 50% of people fail it the first time. I actually think I was told that each of the, at least 2, if not 3 of the other realtors at my brokerage didn't pass the first time, which is very common. But it was very, very important to me that I passed the test. I treated it like it was life and death because it felt like that to me.
You don't have time for games.
I don't have time for games. I was like, because you got to pay each time you take the test too. And I was
Right.
like, I don't have money for this. So
Time and money. Both things you're short on.
100%.
So this is kind of a new thing for you, right? This new chapter of real estate.
Yeah.
What is your end goal for this? What do you see 10 years out of doing real estate?
So for me, I want to be really good at understanding the market and being able to price, market, and sell homes effectively. That's something I'm interested in learning as a skill. Right now, the objective still is, at the moment, to invest in real estate, which is different than what an agent does. And one of the particular individuals I work with does that quite heavily himself. So I'll be able to get some insights from him. But I think owning lots of assets is going to be a no-brainer thing. And so for me, the issue was I was interested in real estate, but I spent 8 hours a day working on something else and dedicating mental energy and learning to a skill that had no relation to what I wanted to do ultimately.
Sure.
So I had it in my mind to be like, I wonder if I could figure out a way to learn more about real estate, make more money so that I can invest in real estate, so that I can double up on the efficiency of my time here.
21 years old. Are you sure that's how old you are?
I think so.
How often do you go out and party and drink at the bars and get hammered?
Well, so I never get hammered, and I pretty much never go out to do those things. And the reason for it is just because it doesn't interest me, because it works at a counter purpose to my goal very often. And my goal is the thing that I care about. Now, for other people, I think their goals are not only different, but they're on a different time span. So they're measuring their goals in terms of like, I have a weekly goal to go out and hang out with friends and enjoy myself. Now that's a goal, right? There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just measured on a shorter time span. And because the goals I have, I'm not measuring in weeks, I'm measuring in years more often than not. It ends up being that other things don't matter very much.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like if you ask someone who's playing a video game and they're super into that video game. It's like, hey, you want to go bowling? I'm like, no,
No.
I'm playing this game and I have to get to the next level.
Yes.
Are you insane? Why would I go bowling?
Right.
The dumbest thing I could ever do. Think about it in terms of that.
Right. Well, that's the thing is it's like whenever you decide to focus on something, everything else is a distraction now.
100%. That's why I don't have hobbies.
Yes.
I'm focused on something and I actually enjoy doing that thing.
Right.
And everything else seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
I have to go to a wedding next week and I'm thinking like all the driving time I got to do.
I know.
I could, you know how many videos I could edit? You know how many shorts I could create? Could have gained a few subscribers.
Yep.
I'm going to be tired. They're going to want me to drink.
Yep. You know, it's hard to say no sometimes, but when you think about it, when you say no, you can train people to not invite you to things that you don't want to go to. And then you'll get more of what you want, which is them not inviting you in the first place.
This is true. I've worked on it my whole life. It works out fairly well.
Yeah.
But because I'm nice, sometimes I cave. We're working on that.
Yeah. It's hard.
There's so many other things I want to talk to you about. I was going to dig in on the real estate thing more, but I think for where you are in this journey and how long we've gone on this podcast, I'm going to leave a little bit of that out until you get a little deeper into real estate, and then we're going to bring you back and do more on the real estate.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk to you about women. I wanted to talk to you about religion and faith. Let's put a button in those for this podcast, and we're going to bring you back and talk about some of that stuff in another episode. Is there anything you can tell people if they've made it this far? If anybody's still listening. If they want to buy a house, should we give them the city where we're at? Is that a problem? What are we?
I don't have an issue with it if you don't.
Okay, yeah. If you live in Bismarck, North Dakota, and you want to buy or sell a house, is there any specific place they should go to find you? Do you want to give your information and email, anything on here?
Yeah, absolutely, actually. If you're interested in using an agent and you like me based off of this podcast, you can email me at silasjackson@capitalrealestatend.com. That's my email. I'm an agent with Capital Real Estate Partners. We have an office in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota.
Beautiful. That's incredible. Silas, I feel like you are not my brother. I feel like you're a complete stranger that I just interviewed, and because I've learned so much, and you're such a wealth of information, man. It's incredible. I have to have you back on, and it's going to be another 3-hour podcast, and that's impressive, you know? So thanks for being on the show, man. Everybody that's watching, we have 2 channels. We have Behind the Glass, which is what this is going to be on, and then we have BTG Squad. I'll put all of that in the description box, along with his videos that we did with him in the past. We did 2 or 3 other podcasts with him before this. I'll put his information in the description box. I'll have it written probably at the bottom of the screen, everything he just said about the email and where he's at. And yeah, we're just going to close out this podcast here. If you like the show, give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, tell your friends about it. And if you know anyone who wants to be on this podcast, email us. You can email us at btgsquad128@gmail.com. And if you have questions or if you have a certain email or a video topic that you want us to talk about, let us know and we'll do that. Silas, I appreciate you, man.
It was great to be on the show, man. I love this.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you in the next episode.
What's cooler than that?
Well, keep it simple, stupid.